Of course, is a huge weekend for us here at the university and Montana State as well, with the Grizz Cat game coming up. It will be a great game, and it is actually both President Cruzado's and my first Grizz Cat game, so there is quite a bit at stake here. I do want to say that you have probably all seen in the news the past couple of weeks this rather big decision that we had at the University of Montana to make on the WAC conference. And whether you agree with that decision or not, I do want to say that the relationship with Montana State University and that Grizz Cat rivalry was a huge part of our consideration during the course of all of that deliberation. And we think that's such a healthy thing for our universities and for the state of Montana, so we're really proud of that rivalry and that relationship and look forward to seeing that play out this weekend. Did you want me to make some introductions now? Or
yeah, we've got a number of introductions. Let's do that now, and then we'll go back to my comments and then on to the normal agenda.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and make a couple of introductions here from the Missoula campus then. So I'd like to first of all begin by introducing our new provost, Perry Brown. Perry, you probably know, he has been on campus for quite a few years as our Dean of the College of Forestry and Conservation. The last 2 years he served as the Associate Provost for Graduate Education, working closely with me in the Provost's office. And so he's our interim provost. We will start a provost search next fall, so Perry will be here this year and next year. So Perry, welcome, thank you. So there's this domino effect that takes place. So I vacated the provost's office. Perry went in there. He vacated the dean of the College of Forestry and Conservation, so we'll begin a search for that dean. He also vacated the associate provost for graduate education position. And I want to introduce to you our new associate provost for graduate education and dean of the graduate school, Stephen Sprang. Stephen's been a faculty member in our Division of Biological Sciences for the past 4 years, and has been just an outstanding researcher and scholar on campus. So Stephen, welcome and thank you. One more announcement that isn't an introduction, but it will be down the road, and that I do want to let you all know that we have initiated the search for the chancellor at Montana Tech of the University of Montana. So Frank Gilmore, as you know, is retiring next July, and Doug Abbott is here representing Montana Tech today, but that search has been initiated. We have a search committee formed, and they are beginning the work of looking for the new chancellor. So you'll hear more about that as we go along. So I'll stop there for now and then come back and do the student part of this in a little bit. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, President Engstrom. Guess I have an opportunity to make a few comments, and I would like to do so. Obviously, we've got some budget discussions to have, and they're on our agenda, and we'll get into the heart of the matter at that time. But I would just like to say, after yesterday's Board of Education meeting, that I think the governor and his budget office has once again demonstrated his longstanding commitment to higher education. I think it does represent some new funding for us, but I think it also comes at a time when we have many new students, and to the tune of several thousand new students, and those funds will be very important to us. I think his comments demonstrated the extreme importance of higher education in our economy, in the lives of the students, in the lives of the families, and we need to do what we can to continue to move that conversation forward. He also very eloquently pointed out this is the first of a step in a process, and we will need to work hard with our staff and as a higher ed community to do the best we can to justify these much needed funds in the legislative session as the process moves forward. It's very important to Montana, it's very important to the country, and it's very important to the lives that it affects. So we look forward to working with the governor's office and the legislature in moving that level of funding forward. There's also some pieces with the pay plan, which, as we all know, is the largest percent of our budget, And the heart and soul of our institutions is the faculty and staff, and we will need to work together to support those endeavors as well. I'd also like to thank Dan Villa, who is the policy advisor, but also has helped on our team immensely and wore a pretty good path down the hall to the budget office in the last few months, sticking up for education funding. And he's done a great job for us, and I think the money that is represented in that budget is well, a large credit to him. So Dan, we thank you for your efforts there. You can clap.
I also do dishes.
Yeah. Windows. Regent Pease wants to know about windows.
I'm 5'6".
So low windows. Okay.
Never mind.
Switching gears, the commissioner and I had the privilege a week or so last week to go to the Witchy Conference. My first was appointed, both the commissioner and I were appointed by the governor recently to serve on that commission, and appreciate his confidence in allowing us to, both of us, to serve in that capacity. Found the conference very interesting. I guess I left there with some concerns and some thoughts that we're on the right track. There was a number of conversations. Sometimes I feel like with the Lumina grant and the things we're doing, we're sort of on the forefront of some of those discussions, and you realize we may not be as much on the forefront as I would have thought. I think we're in the mix, and we're moving that conversation forward, and it's a very important one. But a lot of states and a lot of service organizations are deeply involved in that. One session that I went to was Building Bridges for Success, and it talked about a lot of the same things we're talking about, and I liked it from a sense that it sort of validated the work we're doing with Lumina. The low-hanging fruit is similar. You know, one of the things he talked about was the funding, and the low-hanging fruit in funding is performance-based. Maybe the easiest to get to is changing simply from enrollment-based to outcome-based, course completion, you know, some simple things that can happen. They have consequences. We need to evaluate them carefully, but those conversations are moving forward around the country. I'm pleased they're moving forward in our own institution. The other one that he talked a lot about, the low-hanging fruit. The other couple of things that he mentioned was one that seemed very basic to everyone but is not well embraced by students and faculty, and that is simply attending class. Freshman success, the courses with attendance, the success rate is extremely high. My daughter would kill me for outing her, but we had this conversation with my oldest yesterday, Lauren, and she said, well, I really can't argue with that since I've had statistics. I went to class the first few weeks, took the first test, got a 98, thought I was pretty smart, doing well, didn't go to much class, got a 78 on the second test. Returned to class full-time and got a 97 on the last test and succeeded in the class. But I think it does demonstrate attendance is a big part of it, and at the freshman level it's huge. Not well embraced, seems real straightforward. The other low-hanging fruit item that he had is the drop ad policy, where they've tightened up drop ad. He pointed out that students in their freshman year that complete less than 80% of the courses that they sign up for are 50% less likely to earn a degree. I may be paraphrasing, not quoting. I thought I wrote down what I heard him say, but it sounded to me something like, Clay, you were right all along. Tell Dr. Moore when you get back to Montana. Something like that.
I'm sure he said it.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. And the last piece, I think we've tended to look at demographics in in terms of various groups as a pipeline for us. He's from California, and they use the two-year sector differently, but he spent a lot of his talk talking about the pipeline from two-year education. And I guess a concern that came up in that conversation is we have a number of talks about how we believe it's the right place for students to start. For a number of students, the success agenda is directed toward a lot of two-year participation. As he pointed out, though, those that start in our two-year sector are less likely to earn a degree than those that start in the four. And he really sees that as an issue that we have to fix as a country, because a large number of students around the country start in the two-year and need to prosper there and need to transfer, and most have a transfer mission with earning a four-year degree. And so his data, and all these were data-driven topics that he discussed, but his data shows that there's a tremendous pipeline out of the two-year sector that we're all aware of, but that we need to make better use of, and that we need to see to completion in terms of either a two-year degree or a four-year degree. So the conference was good. I think it validates a lot of the direction we're headed. I think it also is a eye-opening to, we're not quite as cutting edge as I'd like to think we were. We need to continue down these paths. Most other institutions are. Switching gears for a third time, and Commissioner's going to give us a report on the listening sessions, but I want to congratulate the Commissioner for living through another fall of listening tours. I think you visited 20-some campuses. I had the pleasure of visiting the one in the Bitterroot, and I would just like to say that 2 years ago today, we, as a board, had sort of a dark hour and having to turn down an education opportunity in the Bitterroot, which I know is very difficult for board members. But we pledged to get that done, and I think through the hard work of the Bitterroot Valley Steering Committee, who embraced the University of Montana and the leadership under President Engstrom, Sharon Alexander, others that participated, Victoria Clark. We were there a couple weeks ago at a listening session, and higher ed is being delivered in the Bitterroot in a very nice little facility that has a couple classrooms, and it's on its way. And it sort of felt like, out of the ashes to me, a good thing has been done, and it shows that hard work and cooperation can make those things happen. And most of the steering committee from the original Bitterroot group was there and very much embraced what's happened, and we're very appreciative of the university system, Mary Moe's work, and others. So what started as sort of a tough topic for us has ended nicely, and I think that those opportunities will continue to grow in the Bitterroot. So with that, I will hand it back to President Engstrom, and we'll move on with the agenda. Sure. Are there other introductions that we need to make from other campuses before we move on to the agenda? Chancellor Story.
Thank you, Regent Christian. I don't have an introduction, but I do have a little announcement I'd like to make. Right now in Washington, D.C., another of our professors is receiving an award from the Carnegie Foundation. This time it is the State Teacher Award. Her name is Delina Norris Tall. She is an Associate Professor of Education, and she is Chair of our Education Department. And we are thrilled that she has won this state and national recognition.
Great.
President Engstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Oh, sorry.
Chairman Christian, on behalf of Montana State University, I would also like to express my appreciation for being here, and also wanted to let these members know that we'd like to formally welcome the new Chancellor of Montana State University Billings, Dr. Rolf Grosset, into his position, and want to acknowledge
Any other campuses have announcements or introductions? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah. Well, this is indeed a great pleasure and a very nice part of the agenda to feature some student work on the host campus. And so I have enjoyed getting to hear some of the student stories that we've heard at previous meetings on other campuses. And so I'm delighted to introduce to you this morning two small vignettes, if you will, one on the part of some students who will come up in just one moment, and then secondly, a related item on an exhibit that you all will see a little bit later today. And so to begin the student highlight, let me call to the podium, if I could, our Dean of the College of Visual and Performing Arts, Stephen Kalm.
Thank you, President Engstrom, and good morning, everyone. And I want to thank, on behalf of the faculty, staff, and students in my college, I want to thank the Board of Regents and the Commissioner's Office for all the tremendous work you do on behalf of higher education in this state. If you look around you this morning, you'll see some wonderful artwork by the Artist Collective, which is an ASUM student organization. Most of the artists who are members of this organization are student artists are, in fact, art majors or minors, but not necessarily. Not all of them are. The advisor for that group is Assistant Professor Trey Hill from the School of Art. The School of Art has approximately 350 majors, and I'm going to introduce two of them to you right now. One is Burke Jam, who was born and raised in Red Lodge, Montana, and he received his BA in art from the University of Montana in 2006. After living and working in Seattle, Washington at the International Academy of Design, he returned to his home state to pursue an MFA in sculpture at the University of Montana School of Art. And the second student is Ellie Weber, and she's from Great Falls, and she'll be graduating this spring with a BFA in ceramics. Ellie is a member and officer in the Students Ceramics Club on campus, and she's also an officer of the University of Montana Artists Collective, and it's my pleasure to introduce them. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks very much for having us. We're both excited and a little overwhelmed to be here. This is a much bigger audience than we were expecting. Thanks for the introduction, Dean Kalm. My name is Burke Jam, and a quick couple minutes on my work and what I do here at the university. My research in sculpture intends to reconnect viewers and an audience to their physical place. Where we stand in a landscape determines what we can see, and that determines our perspective. This perspective defines where we go and how we move through a landscape. I have a piece over here that is a stone piece that's in progress. It's a site-specific piece, so the stones will be installed into a landscape. I view these stones as kind of markers of perspective in that landscape, the idea behind what happens to horizon line when we reach it, and how that determines how we move through the land and experience the world around us. Sculpture, to me, is a really exciting and open medium that's no longer just about three-dimensional objects. It's about where those objects exist, and it's about why those objects exist in that place. And in that, it's about how we connect through the world by way of those objects and that experience. So thank you for your time, and I hope you guys enjoy your stay in Montana, in Missoula. This is Ellie.
Hi, I'm Ellie. Thank you, Dean Kalm, for the introduction. I am in my final year of my BFA with my focus in ceramics, and my piece is the yellow sculpture in the back corner over there. I'm currently working on a series of abstracted organs and body parts focusing on the storage and release of emotions in the human body. These pieces become social commentaries derived through stories, experience, and observation. This body of work that I'm working on stems from my concern with the disregard of our personal feelings and those of the individuals that surround us. I'm curious about the process of expression and attachment through the accumulation or expulsion of these pleasurable and harmful emotions that we all have. As you can see, I've been incorporating mixed media as extensions to these sculptures in reference to this contrast between the internal and the external. So I also want to thank President Engstrom for providing U of M art students the opportunity to show at this event. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you both for being here this morning. Good work. And now I'd like to introduce to you the director of our Montana Museum of Art and Culture, Barbara Kustra.
Thank you so much, President Engstrom, and thank you so much for having me here for the first time this morning. It's my pleasure. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to come before you. I returned last night from a quick trip over to Billings, where I had the great joy of celebrating the 93rd birthday of Ben Steele, the wonderful artist and POW, a man who survived the Bataan Death March. He's also an artist who created a body of work that explains in very beautiful artistic fashion that experience. Well, he just recently gifted that collection to the University of Montana, and so that collection, we're very delighted to say, joins the 10,000 plus other pieces of art and artifacts in our permanent collection. Hundreds of people attended that event, and it was a joy to be there. He's a Montana treasure, and so is the collection that we have here on campus. But I'm really here to invite you cordially to this afternoon's reception from 5 to 6:30 over in the PAR TV, the Performing Arts Building across from the Adams Center. We'll be delighted to have you as we celebrate Renoir, Magritte, Gauguin, and other masterpieces from a private collection on loan to us through March 12th. And we're also celebrating part of that permanent collection that belongs to all Montanas that I spoke of a moment ago in a show called 3 Centuries of European Prints from the permanent collection of the Montana Museum of Art and Culture. We've already received some nifty reviews of these shows, and if you'll indulge me for just a moment, I'd like to share a couple of quick quotes. Quote, "The exhibits brought us to our knees. We'll be back several more times." Second quote, "I feel like I'm in London or Rome." And thirdly, the audience couldn't stop talking about what they were seeing, pointing and smiling and just gazing open-mouthed at the sheer awesomeness of this work. So we hope you'll find, as we have, that this is a great learning opportunity for students and learners of all ages. We already are anticipating tour groups from Polson, from Bonner, from Bozeman, and Missoula schools, and if our past exhibitions are any indicator, we'll also have groups from places like Hardin, Coal Strip, Wolf Creek, Shelby, Troy, Geraldine, Browning, on and on. So hope you'll join us from 5 to 6:30 this evening, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. At a campus like the University of Montana, Missoula, the breadth of programming is just tremendous, and so we wanted to highlight just one part of that today by showing you some of the artwork. And again, come to that reception. Perry Brown is hosting that reception at 5 o'clock, and we had the pleasure of going to an opening reception a week or so ago, and I can tell you that the works there are simply stunning, and they are works that you will likely not see in Montana again. So please take advantage of that. We're delighted to have that here. Thank you.
Thank you, President Engstrom. So we're ready to move on to the Commissioner's report under system issues.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And one thing I would like to call attention to is that once again, we are pleased and privileged to have Montana PBS filming and recording this and streaming it live for people across the state of Montana. I know that many of you from the campuses have sort of empowered your staff not to make the trip so that they could still stay in tune and be well informed and yet not have to travel to do so. We appreciate that. We can perhaps at 1 o'clock when we reconvene, maybe Michael Ballard will let us know or write down for us the various ways that this will be also captured and rebroadcast to many sites across the state, and the dates that those will happen. He's got all of that. He has, I was looking over his shoulder earlier this morning, as Mary Moe always told me, be sure when there's going to be a camera on you say, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up. So I wanted to look and see how that was looking, because they're doing a little feature on each of you, members of the Board of Regents. They have your picture and your background and when you were appointed by the governor and how long your term lasts. And so that will be part of it. I think it'll be a very educational program for people across Montana who take a look at that. And we're very grateful. And we think they did a great job in September, and I think we'll only get better. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll move on. I'm going to insert a bullet before we get to the fall enrollment report, and that is a report on the listening sessions, a kind of high-level report, because members of the board, each of you participated in one or more of these, or most of you were able to. And so what this is to do a kind of a high-level walkthrough of we have many, many notes, we have evaluations from these, but I picked some thoughts, but I would like to give you a kind of a class assignment, members of the board, because you'll see that I picked out a sentence or two, but you were there at some of them, and I think we can follow up, if not in this session this morning, tomorrow morning when we're talking about College Now and the university system, and add to the reflections, because what happens to create a feedback loop, you shouldn't listen if you don't plan to act and to discern what the public and the constituents and stakeholders are telling you. And so what we will do is in our senior retreat in early December is to sift through what we see as the most focused items that we can affect your planning for your January meeting, for action, for change, and we will bring those back to you. So yeah, I would like to hear some of your observations, and Mr. Chairman, if we have some time as I get finished with this, we may, because we have between now and 10 o'clock for various topics, but we may be able to fit in some of it, otherwise tomorrow. So my take on it, I just decided to go by town and city in just in alphabetical order. So let's plunk them up there one by one. And I think in alphabetical order, the first one is, what happened to Billings? Well, maybe my alphabet is not so great, but Bozeman was a very robust meeting, and the real takeaway for me was that civic and business leaders are energetic. They were there in force. They're very positive about the potential of the Gallatin College, and they made a strong pledge to be creative and resourceful to help that program grow appropriately to meet the needs of the region. Next, Billings, and there we heard, and I'm sure that when we get a chance, Todd and many others were there, here, will add to this, that communication is key to the growing value of the Missoula MSU Billings College of Technology. And one of the things we heard was that even, and it came up a little bit this morning, Regent Buchanan, that even some of MSUB's own faculty and staff mentioned they felt somewhat disconnected regarding developments in the college. And we heard that, and it gave me an idea for follow-up action regarding to that. We certainly heard that in Billings, with the College of Technology and with the main campus, the senior campus, that partnerships for workforce with the school district, we heard eloquently from the school district, from the head of the Parmley Billings Public Library about the joint arrangements with the satellite library, that such partnerships are innovative and thriving, and they want us to thinking, whether it's in performance-based allocations or whatever, be aware of and reward those kinds of partnerships. Next is Butte. What we heard there, a number of things. That the College of Technology is certainly a vital part of Montana Tech. It could be stronger with greater investment in their facilities and possible relocation of those facilities. And of course, we heard strong support for additional graduate degrees and recognition of the importance of research on that campus. Next, we go to the G's, Glasgow. A small but very interesting group there. They mentioned, school board members were there, the superintendent and others. They mentioned business people. They mentioned their pleasure with the greater transferability in the Montana University system. But I heard more there than I heard at any other venue. They're concerned about students taking too many, quote, unnecessary credits. And frankly, that's going to take some digging to really figure out what they meant. But they're very positive about the college now work, really, to define a smaller set of courses, a smaller transfer core that we're working on, as you all know, choices that count. And I think at a meeting a year or so ago, Regent Taylor and Regent Pease called that, let's, for a lot of students, just give them door number 1. I think that was you, Regent Pease, and maybe not so much door number 2 and door number 3, because there are some students for whom that becomes 150 or 160 credits before they get a degree instead of 120, 130, and they still have a chance for exploration. So also Glasgow is proud of their low remediation rate. At least they asserted it, and believe me, I beat a track back to Helena and to Associate Commissioner Tyler Trevor, and he looked it up and he said, by golly, they do have a very low remediation rate of students from Glasgow as they matriculate into the Montana University system. Glendive, they wanted us, and President Cargill can help add to this, they certainly want us to convey to the state the value of what they have built there in that beautiful spot on the edge of Makoshika State Park. Regent Pease did some work while we were waiting in their library, and she, I'm not sure, had been in the library before and was just, thought, as we all do, that it's breathtaking, the improvements that community has stepped forward to help make and to convey their importance to the vibrancy of their region. It's very obvious. And I think there's another, Great Falls. Nice turnout there, and one of the people who attended is the new Speaker of the House, Mike Milburn, was present and engaged in that listening session, in that conversation. Very gracious and supportive of higher education. And what we heard there, and Joe and others can elaborate, is that the College of Technology is one of the city's and that region's greatest points of pride and source for economic development, and that it is really key to meeting the healthcare and other workforce needs. Their partnership with Benefice and other employers in the region are critical, and they just urged us to keep investing in the college. A number of H's in our state. We went to Hamilton, as Clay mentioned. Regent Christian and I and President Engstrom were moved. We were with Dr. Mary Sheehy Moe, and kind of like Carol Burnett used to do at the end of her show, if you're old enough to remember this, I suspect Mary's watching, so I'm going to pull my ear to say hello to Mary. But that was a very rewarding day for that to be her last day as Deputy Commissioner, because she had to do some heavy lifting to say maybe the model of a completely independent community college with a business plan that seemed not necessarily sustainable to this board and to the legislature. So to hear them on October 29th tell her and tell Regent Christian that they really appreciate the outreach from the University of Montana in establishing the Bitterroot College program and in growing a strong college presence there, and the fact that they gave us a tour of their site. It's a nice part of their new kind of economic development building in the region and close to job service. But isn't it a good story to tell that they're already outgrowing it? I think it has President Engstrom a little nervous because, of course, it's you have to figure out, like we do with Gallatin and all of our programs, success is a nice problem to have. Harlowton, the famous, and my husband is a native and would say anyone who says Harlow Town, you're wrong. So if you're in doubt, just say Harlow. And they had one of the best turnouts, and I almost would like to turn it over to Todd. Would you just elaborate on this one for me? It was such a fun one, didn't you think, Regent Buchanan?
I did. And, it was interesting. The mix of attendance was worth noting. The entire senior class was there and very engaged, and it was so interesting and encouraging to see their perspective of what the university system is up to. And as you all know, in towns like Harleton, small towns across Montana, the commissioners and the ditch supervisors or the local community members that know everybody, and the camaraderie and relationship between the folks that were there really created a vibrant conversation. Harleton really stuck out to me in a couple of ways as a place that is focused on the right vision as higher ed is concerned. They have a mantra going on throughout, starts in grade school, where each of the classes adopts a higher education center in the state, including our private colleges. And so for that year, the first graders cheer on Carroll College, and they wear Carroll College paraphernalia. Move on to second grade, another unit in our system or in the state is the one that they champion. And there was a funny story that their slogan is, "Where are you going?" And so everyone, their response always is, "To college." And they've got, I think it says Go College. What is it? Go College?
Destination education.
And they've got T-shirts and everything. All the students are wearing these. And one of the stories that made me crack up, the administrator was talking about how it's so ingrained in these kids, and that's what they're thinking about, that he'll often run into somebody in the high school hallway and he'll say, "No, where are you going?" And they'll say, "Carroll College," or U of M or whatnot. And he's like, no, why are you in the hall? You know, what are you doing out of class? But it was really reflective of the community's commitment to higher education. And there was another thing that stood out. I don't know how it came to be. I have to assume somebody donated it, but the students have ownership over the local movie theater. So all revenues generated from popcorn sales, ticket sales, go to the students, and they're not rewarded with a paycheck. They're rewarded with a deposit into their college savings account. And many of the students were saying, "I have $3,000 saved up. I have $2,500 saved up from selling popcorn at the local movie theater." They pick out the movie. They own it. And it just kind of further embraces that commitment towards the next step. And we asked all of the students where they were going, and there were a couple kids that have natural resource and oil jobs on their mind, but for the vast majority, and I was extremely excited to hear that it's mostly Montana schools that they're aiming for and have clearly thought about the types of curriculum they're going to pursue. It's a dialogue that it just was extremely encouraging. It makes you want to go back to your hometown and say, how do we kind of integrate this dialogue to first graders and second graders so that they keep talking about it throughout their education experience. It was really fun to be a part of that conversation.
Thank you, and it's why we should call them not just listening, but they're learning sessions for us. So on to Havre. Chancellor Trokey had developed a major panel discussion, and we used that as our listening tour that day. And I would say most of the legislators from the High Line, let's see if Chancellor Trokey's here, were there and were very engaged. And one of the things that struck me as we talked about the various ways, President Cruzado and others, that as they asked us about, are you really being efficient? Are you really using transferability? Are you sharing some back office or figuring out how to do IT or payroll in better collaborative ways? And as we described some of those, retiring Senator Jerry Black said, "Tell your story." Well, we know that, and our emphasis on communication, we know that the need for that and the need to step that up in every way that we can. So they did emphasize to us, given a little bit of a scare early in the summer, that legislators and others emphasized the robust quality of the educational opportunity at MSU Northern, including its 2-year and certificate programs, and just wanted us to bring that message back. And finally, for the H is Helena, and there I want to thank Dean Daniel Bingham for his flexibility. There was a little confusion on time, so Daniel and I did it twice for a couple small groups, and sometimes those smaller groups were more like focus groups and just as valuable. One individual wanted to know more about, sort of remind me of the advantages of the Regents 1995 restructuring, and I think he learned and was acknowledged some of the collaborative and shared work that goes on. Dean Bingham did a really nice job of explaining that, with how the campuses work together. They also expressed to us their pride in partnership with regional employers and with the school district. Superintendent Bruce Messenger was there, and Dean Bingham gave us a tour to their, what they call Access to Success, and I actually visited with some students who are part of that Access to Success cohort, who are Helena juniors or seniors who are attending class, finishing high school for various reasons, but they're finishing it on the campus through a very unique program that Daniel's told us about before, but I must be a visual learner because I just didn't really get it until I walked down to it with Daniel and Dr. Messenger and saw how it worked. So on to Kalispell. Great turnout in Kalispell and such affirmation of President Jane Karras and her staff from the individuals there. The two real themes that came through is their pride and appreciation in the agile and strong response that the college makes to the workforce needs of that region. We heard from several workforce and employee groups and needs. But we also heard strong concern expressed about dual enrollment and about the role that Class 8 licensure plays in that. And so we know that there's need for more understanding and communication in that arena. So let's see, you were there too. Did you want to add to that? I caught it in 2 sentences there. Good. Lewistown, I would like to acknowledge that the new president of the Senate, Jim Peterson, was there in the front row and very pleased at the extent to which the university system has worked with EOCM, Educational Opportunities for Central Montana. So looking back, we saw lots of legislators on this tour, but the fact that we had president, one or the other, the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate, in kind of a pat your back way, but also here are some things we need, was a great basis for communication. Their director, Diane Oldenburg, is terrific. She's been doing it for 20 years. She'll be present in the stadium like a lot of good, loyal Montanans, because she's just a real fan of higher education all across the state. And they're just a can-do group and think that their model is also one that should get a shout out from time to time, and it should. Miles City, like to thank President Hickswa, but we also had present several legislators, including one who was unopposed, and so he will be taking former term-limited Senator Keith Bale's place. And so it was an opportunity to really have a conversation with him. He may end up taking Senator Bale's place on finance and claim. We don't know, but he was very interested in college now and in what we're doing. And they wanted to make sure that we are enhancing the community college mission and the traditional community colleges, and that we're not diminishing them, and for us to be aware of the extent to which those partnerships contribute to the whole area. And in Missoula, I think it's safe to say that the main theme of that get-together out at the College of Technology campus was that several of our Missoula and regional legislators came and sat right in the front row and really emphasized to us rather strongly that they are willing to shoulder a share of the load in support of the university system and the College of Technology, its building needs, and they pressed us pretty hard, when you say, Regent Christian, to say, you know, we're on the team here, include us, and I don't know if you'd like to add to that.
No, I think that's right.
Okay. Yeah, and, you know, fair enough. To the extent that any legislator, policymaker feels somewhat disconnected, that was something we needed to listen and learn. Going on to Pablo at Salish Kootenai College, they were having a major family event that we thought we nearly canceled, and we were so glad we didn't, because there was such a good turnout of school leaders in the region and others that made it still a good conversation. And they talked about their interest in dual enrollment and in guidelines relating to that, and they certainly have concern, as we all do, about tuition for taking dual enrollment courses. And I guess I'll give a shout out. Dan, is Dan stepped out? I want to give a shout out to Dan and the governor's budget for putting some funds into helping us figure out how to provide opportunities and maybe evening out tuition for dual enrollment. And go ahead,
We
please.
did have a fairly robust conversation about how funding will flow in duly enrolled students, and making certain that it doesn't necessarily detract from the K through 12 budgets. I think that's a very valid point, and one we need to continue. And I think across the country the model has been when both institutions are funded, it works a lot better, and it's a motivator and an incentive to see that happen. But they're very interested in duly enrolled students. It was sort of a difficult meeting for me, though, because my old high school counselor was there. And he was talking a lot about what track students are on, and he kept asking me questions about that.
And in Poplar, Regent Pease and I had made a trip to Glendive and Sydney, and then back to her home campus of Fort Peck Community College. Would you like to comment on that, Regent Pease?
Well, we were very fortunate to have a conversation about how we tie into the MUS units and how our college could be better or served certainly through probably distance education kinds of opportunities, and to realize that there are some really important connections and partnerships that we can realize in the future. It was a good conversation.
It really was, and I want to thank the school boards put out a call and made sure that a couple of principals and superintendents came, and they really added to the richness of that focus group. And Sydney, a small group, but Senator Don Steinbeiser was there, and the superintendent of schools that's working on that task force with you, Chancellor Groseth, and with Tom Gibson has been chairing to build on their needs for higher educational outreach. And what interested me there, I thought was a real theme, was their ties to their local library and ag research station, and they really see building on that and expanding programs and outreach both in dual enrollment with Dotson Community College, very appreciative of that, Jim, and then also in figuring out some of the energy tech programs that they need. And I think that's the end of my listening session. That's the alphabet. So I'll go, if any questions or comments, members of the board, or, yes, Lynn, or excuse me, if I may, Mr. Chair, may I call on Regent Hamilton? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioner. I'm confused a little bit about the issue with dual enrollment tuition. And maybe it's because I'm behind the times. I thought we had permissive statutes that allowed high schools to count A and B for those dual enrollment students, and then we had permissive statutes that allowed colleges to count FTE for those students. So what is it that the concern is?
Regent Hamilton, as I understand it, the concern is that are different, those permissive statutes are fine, and they hope that they continue, but that the different scholarships, if you will, or waivers that our different colleges provide, so that, it might be more economical to take a course from Montana Tech if it's more generous with its waivers than from another college which cannot afford to be as generous with its waivers. So that's the issue. Good question. Okay, should I move along? Okay, at the November meeting each year, members of the board, we finally have the one of the main performance metric that we have in our allocation and every other model, and that's when Associate Commissioner Trevor will present the 2010 enrollment report.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, good morning. I'd like to take an opportunity here this morning just to reflect a little bit on our fall enrollment comparison over the past 10 years. Once again, I'm up here telling you that we've hit another record. This is basically a mirror of what happened last year. It's over a 5% increase in FTE from fall to fall. And if we move along to the next slide, there's a breakdown of those increases. And you can see by taking a look at residency and student level that resident undergraduates saw a healthy increase as well as resident graduates. A lot of growth in our non-resident undergraduates and WUI, and basically a flat FTE level for our non-resident graduates, but an overall 5.4% increase over last fall. And if you remember last year, we had a 6.8% increase. So those 2 years combined are larger than the 10 previous years worth of growth. It's giant. Taking a look at the FTE by institutional level, at the doctoral, the UM and MSU flagship campuses, we saw 800 new FTE for a 3.6% increase. At our four-year campuses, 500 new FTE for a 7% increase. And our two-year campuses growing once again at about 700 new FTE for 9%. And a quick breakdown by campus. You can take a look through that. Wow, that was quick. Bozeman side, the MSU side, at 6% increase. All of the campuses growing.
Before you, it was quick again. Before you go on, I think we have enough time. If any campus leader would like to make a comment on something that you think that would help us understand this better, jump in. Just make sure we get your attention. Whether it's, I don't know, MSU Billings or MSU Great Falls or whatever, let us know. In observation, this would be the time to do it.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, I just wanted to make one point about the growth on the UM side, if I could, please. The growth on the Missoula campus, and the other campuses may see this too, but we have looked at that, and that growth represents two things really, roughly equal. One is new students to the campus, but the second is improved retention of students who are already here. So I think it's important to note that those student success and retention efforts are really paying off. So this is not just all new students coming to the campuses.
Thank you, President Engstrom. I guess I would have a question for, is the same true for the College of Technology at that 11%? Or that's more related to the recession and the economy, or both?
The COT growth is more new
Oh, that's what you were talking about. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, no, the main campus I meant, that was the one where it's half due to retention and half due to new students. But the COT campus, that growth is almost entirely new students coming to the campus. I should have said that.
Okay, and one more question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. What about Chancellor Story? 10% at UM Western? You know, having served as chancellor there, I would still be dancing a jig. So it's pretty significant. Did you want to comment?
Thank you, Commissioner Stearns. I'm dancing, but you can't see my feet. Well, we think it's because of Experience One, experiential learning, and the successes that we've had on our campus. It's hard for any of us to really know what these numbers mean in terms of the economy, but we suspect that it's not as big an impact in a small community like Dillon as it is in larger cities around the state. We don't have data. That's just a suspicion that we think about. But our campus has worked at it, as you folks know, with the academic program and the successes that we've had with it.
Commissioner Stearns, in terms of the Montana State University campuses, I'd just like to point out in particular the significant growth associated with the Gallatin College programs, and just to take this opportunity to thank Dean Bob Heitella and his staff for, in this transition time, the tremendous effort they've done to not only maintain the programs that were previously offered under the a prior structure, but to enhance those and to grow those in serving through developmental coursework additional students that have greatly benefited Montana State University Bozeman students as well.
Okay, moving along, we have one slide. We haven't, no, back up one, please. Touching upon the community college FTE report. Just a footnote there by Dawson, we have a star, which means we haven't integrated your data into the warehouse yet. We're working on it, and we will have your official numbers. In fact, we do have them, just didn't update it for this report. They are about flat, the same as the previous fall semester. Okay, the final slide, a student profile. I'll preface it by saying this does not include the community colleges. This is data straight out of our warehouse based upon unduplicated head count. But I find some of this information the most interesting. First-time freshmen, we grew by almost 600 students. It's one of the larger jumps in first-time freshmen that we've seen in the past 10 years. The next is transfer students. And just looking at transfer students in terms of moving from an MUS two-year educational institution, that actually does include the community colleges, as well as the COTs, to a four-year campus. We have had traditionally low numbers here. They're still relatively low, but the growth is very encouraging. 64 over the previous year, a 22% increase. And then taking a look at enrollment by age, one of the primary themes of College Now and our overall initiative in the system to increase access is to ensure that non-traditional students are having access to our system and succeeding. Well, this definitely indicates that there's access. The largest group, although they are the largest in terms of age categories, the 25 to 49-year-old group increased by 1,000 students, or 9%, for an overall headcount increase of 3.7%. Mr. Chair, that concludes my enrollment report. I'd be glad to answer any questions if there are.
Thank you. Regent Buchanan.
Tyler, on the first-time freshman jump, any way of identifying if those are Montana kids or out-of-state kids?
Mr. Chair, Regent Buchanan, we certainly do have a way of finding that out. I don't have it on the right on the tip of my brain, but that is an analysis we do. It's part of our high school follow-up report by tracking those students that graduate in the previous spring into the university system. And the more I talk about it, the more I'm remembering. And there was a 300 student increase over the previous fall, so we know that those first-time freshmen are definitely being increased by Montana students.
Regent Pease.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Trevor, Dr. Tyler, anyway. I'm really hoping that we can have some quality in that transfers pattern. Excuse me. I'm sorry, I'll make it up to you later. That's such a tremendous increase. I'm thinking that our emphasis in the COTs for the core transfer, all of the work that we've done, I guess I'm hoping we can track where those students are transferring from, because I think that it's evidence of work done well out there in the two-year sector.
Mr. Chair, Regent Pease, we certainly have the capability to track where they transferred from. Those campuses that are in our data warehouse, we can even look back to their course taking patterns at those two-year campuses, and with even a little bit more work, relate that to the work that they do at the campus they transferred to.
Thank you. Well, Regent Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on Regent Pease's comment, I'm wondering if there's a way, and maybe it's just anecdotal, that you can connect that increase in transfers to both, or the pricing differential that has been implemented over the set period of time, and also to the communications that are out there now, both in the earlier marketing efforts of the Commissioner's Office, but also now with College Now. Is there a way that we're going to be able to kind of tie any of this together?
Mr. Chair, Regent Hamilton, there is a way. We know who these students are. We certainly can survey them. And I think that would probably be the only manner in which we could get to that information.
You mean you don't think all those new freshmen are from Harleton?
Thank you.
Go
All right,
ahead.
I think we're ready to move on to the strategic plan.
Mhm.
Commissioner?
Yes, and this is a trial, members of the board, and we'll like your feedback, but it occurs to us that one of the ways to keep the various objectives, goals and objectives of the strategic plan before us is to ask the campuses to look at one focused piece of the plan at each meeting and to walk us through just a little bit how we're doing, and if we're doing well, why, and if we're not doing so well, why. And the distance learning one is one of particular interest to legislators that we talk to across the state, so we thought that would be a good one to talk about at this meeting. So I know that President Engstrom and leaders from the campuses and Provost Fedock, I assume that, comments or whatever from your campuses, we'll turn first of all to Mr. Trevor and let him take it from there.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Chair, members of the board, just a quick overview here. One of our one-pagers that has been most recently updated based upon fall 2010 enrollment figures is the information that we put together on distance learning. And you've heard me say this numerous times, but this chart that you're looking at here represents one of the strongest growth trends that we have in the university system. In fall 2001, we had about 2,000 students that were enrolled in at least one credit of distance learning. And by fall 2010, that has increased to 8,000 students, and now almost 20% of our student population will enroll in at least one distance learning course. Some of the other interesting points related to this and questions that you've often had of me in the past is, well, how many of those students actually are enrolled solely online? And I see Regent Hamilton shaking her head because she's asked me that before, and I've stood here and said, well, we can find out, but I don't have that information for you. So I included it this time. We had over 2,300 students enrolled solely online. And I think what's significant about that number is, and you could probably guess this, that the vast majority of those students, 75%, are non-traditional students taking advantage of our virtual college capabilities. We do a lot of talking about virtual college and developing virtual college. Well, we have virtual college capabilities. MUS.edu online is our portal to the campuses and can hook students up with all of the courses that we have that are available online. 25% only, I guess, were enrolled, of those solely online students were enrolled full-time. So while we have quite a few, there's still growth there to be had in the full-time solely online. A couple other interesting bullet points is that we now have almost 100 degree and certificate programs available online in the university system. Those programs, the qualifier is 80% of those programs are online. 80% of the course content of those programs is available online. That's to allow some of those programs where you have to have some sort of residency to be included in this list. Nonetheless, it is very impressive. You can see the breakdown on this sheet by degree level. And then finally, a bullet about another question that often comes up, collaboration. Distance learning obviously is an avenue for campuses to collaborate on degree programs. We keep track of that. Tom Gibson, our Director of E-Learning, is constantly collecting this information, and as a result, we have the data that 6 of our online programs are offered in collaboration with at least 2 or more MUS institutions. We're growing that as we speak. I know our health information technology online program, there's been a lot of discussion in the system about sharing courses and sharing enrollment serves as somewhat of a pilot for our so-called seamless enrollment. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd conclude my report and take any questions.
Tyler, if I may, I know that, or I'm quite sure that Mr. Gibson is watching streaming video back in Bo's at his office, but those bullets on the major accomplishments relate directly to his work, which was funded by and led by not just you members of the board, but by the governor and the legislature in the 2005 and 2007 sessions. It's those kinds of actions which, he was key at working with the leaders from the campuses to do those 5 bullets that are resulting in what we think, there's certainly room for improvement, but what we think are some good measurements, good progress. And we'll hear some particulars from the campuses, but we'll be interested in your response after we do hear from the campuses a little bit.
Thank you. I have a couple comments. First, these are obviously very encouraging and welcome numbers. The comment I have to make is really more directed, I think, to the campuses than you, but sort of to prove the point that what I need to do is get a life. I spent one day, went to the
this is dangerous.
went to the MUS website, clicked on distance learning, and went to each campus and followed each link to the programs they offered to see where you could get, and mostly you did not get to a conclusion. You got to a significant number of either just dead pages that didn't retrieve, or it would wind up taking you just back to a general campus link up. And so the fact that we get these numbers, I think it's to some degree in spite of what we're doing, not because of what we're doing. The students want this, and I would just urge those on the campuses. This isn't something that at the OCHI level is going to do, but those on the campuses who are putting those links together for those students to follow should pretend you're a student someday and try and follow them. And they were not great conclusions.
Regent Barrett, I asked this question and I'm scared about the answer because I haven't explored it that well myself. But on that first bullet, developing a common website for single point of access to online courses, I don't know how well we're doing in the MUS office on that, pulling all that together. I think better than we used to, at least.
Well, that would be well and good. It would be useful, but think about the logic of that. That website would then link you to those same places about which I spoke.
That don't take you very far.
That don't take you very far. So certainly, again, these are good numbers.
Okay, good.
But I think it's the lesson is if that were easier, what might they be?
Factoring in your technical skills, of course. Regent Pease.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to make a similar comment, but thank you for doing it. At any rate, I'd just like to mention that one of the students at Fort Peck Community College wanted to take an intro to electricity, and it wasn't offered at our college in the fall. So I suggested that he look at the MUS website, the portal, not really thinking that he would necessarily do so, but he did, and by the end of the week he was enrolled at another college within the university system in that class, and he finished it. And of course, I think that speaks to the agility of our students in this generation. They can know where that portal is and know how to use it and get right down to business. But these are figures that are just incredible. And it also, I think, speaks to the power of the purse in directing initiative. Perhaps this would have happened otherwise. But I think it also shows that it, with very specific emphasis on the use of precious resources that the legislature and the governor and certainly our system has, we have made a tremendous difference in what's offered in our state. And also in serving the older students, it looked to me that we have probably a fourth of our student body who are 25 and over now. in the system. And I think that is a tremendous, well, it's quite a ways from where we were, let's say, 10 years ago. Of course, it's the economic times, but I think that's, our system has a quality to it in its student body that is altogether new and really importantly different.
Regent McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is really, really great news, I think, and as we move forward with distance delivery of our curriculum, one of the key components I think that MSU has honed in on is the importance of faculty development and faculty support, and that's where you've directed some of your funds from your increased enrollment. And I guess I was just wondering what the other campuses are doing in regards to faculty support and development in regards to distance education.
Regent McLean, Chairman Christian, and members of the board, I would like to ask the campuses to individually respond to that, but maybe before that, I would like to speak on behalf of all of the MSU campuses to give just a bit of a little detail to provide some context for that. And you've seen the statistics relative to the growth for the Montana University system. I wanted you to have sort of comparable data to see how the performance of the MSU campuses have been in this arena. So just I'll try to keep the numbers to a relative minimum here, but just 3 numbers I want to provide to you to show the growth in 3 metrics over the last fiscal year between FY09 and FY10. And in terms of all of the campuses of Montana State University, in terms of the number of online programs and certificates, that growth rate was 18.2%. In terms of the number of online courses, it was 20.4%. And in terms of online student credit hour generation, that growth rate was 7.9%. So these numbers are certainly very supportive of the growth of the overall Montana University system, and we're proud of each campus's contributions in that arena. A couple more aspects of our distance learning initiatives from a Bozeman perspective, I just wanted to briefly articulate and to speak to a couple points that have been identified earlier, and that is in the area of collaboration. And I just want to have board members be aware of the collaborations that MSU Bozeman's College of Engineering has had with MSU Billings and with Montana Tech, both online and video conferencing to share undergraduate engineering courses, as well as now the development of a relationship with the University of Montana to share online courses in computer science. And so we're very much looking forward to expanding those collaborative relationships. We also participate in 3 national consortia programs as well that I think is greatly serving our students statewide, and to build on the work of others, and those involve the Great Plains IDEA programs, as well as the WICHE Internet Course Exchange program that we've been involved with here. We've tried to provide additional incentives to help sort of raise the profile of distance education on the Montana State University Bozeman campus. And so this year we've just created an outstanding online teaching award for the first time. And so we will be recognizing a faculty member of Bozeman at our annual faculty awards program to specifically highlight that individual who has contributed to advancing online education. We think this is a very important recognition of faculty efforts in that regard. We're also very pleased with respect to some of the students that have participated in our online programs, and I just wanted board members and everyone in the audience to be aware of a recent accomplishment by Dora Huggs. And Dora Huggs is a Crow elder and a science teacher in Pryor, Montana. And she received the Outstanding Non-Traditional Student Award from the University Professional and Continuing Education Association. That's the national organization that continuing education professionals participate in at the regional level, and she received this award recently in Seattle. Dora completed Montana State University's Master of Science degree in Science Education, which is offered primarily, although not exclusively, online. And she teaches science and Crow language in Pryor, and believes that very strongly that her degree has allowed her to teach science in a way that's accurate in science content while remaining meaningful and consistent with the culture of her students. And so we're very pleased to see her receive that award and one of our graduates from one of our online degree programs in the graduate arena. As you mentioned, Regent McLean, President Cruzado has moved forward, I would say very aggressively, in wanting to support faculty development efforts relative to online education. There will be a significant investment by Montana State University Bozeman in expanding in that arena, and we're looking forward very much to becoming even larger participants in that arena. And with that, I guess I would like to ask representatives from the other Montana State University campuses maybe to comment on your question or other aspects of their contributions in distance education.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. MSU Billings, of course, was an early adapter in online learning and has for the last dozen or so years been significantly involved in online learning. Of those 2,300 plus students who are enrolled in only in online courses, about 35% of those or 800 or so are from MSU Billings. So that's about 16% of our students who are enrolled only online. Another 28% or so are enrolled in online courses and face-to-face. So it's really become part of the fabric of the institution, and we have all the faculty development efforts, not as much as we'd like, of course, but some pretty significant avenues for faculty to learn about online learning. There are lots of role models on campus in nearly every department now, so it's really been a staple of the campus and will continue to do so. We have 3 new programs that have come online this fall, 2 two-year programs and 1 master's degree program. So we're continuing to grow and see that certainly as one of the elements of our growth in the future.
Regent McLean, Chairman Christensen, MSU Northern is happy to say that the online degree between the RN and the BSN is growing, and not only do we have several students involved enrolled in that program online within the state, but also have attracted a number of individuals outside of the state of Montana wanting to pursue a BSN online. The BS degree in business is totally online and is seeking enrollment from a number of individuals, again, within Montana as well as outside of Montana enrolling in that degree. I believe it is a very popular endeavor, and both degrees have had significant faculty involvement. We also offer a number of courses in Gen Ed, especially in, for that matter, Native American studies, as well as Gen Ed in relationship to English and math, etc. And although not as many as Billings, we do have in the works at least 2 other degree programs that will be brought forward in the near future, again, developed by faculty for people within Montana, and will be totally, again, online, and these will represent 4-year degrees. We also have a certificate that we are pursuing at the graduate level for that will be on online, as well as a hybrid model which will include face-to-face. And some of the other courses that we do in civil engineering, a hybrid, electrical, and a few others, again, hybrid because of the laboratory nature of the courses requiring some hands-on or some face-to-face as they go through the program.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Regent McLean, I'll start with your comment, I think, first. For the past 6 years, MSU Great Falls has had a course that we've offered in a variety of formats, primarily for our faculty, both adjunct and full-time. It's called Facilitating Online Learning. It's a semester-long course where we've offered graduate credit through our partner institutions. But essentially, it's to train our faculty in how to facilitate online learning. A portion of that class, they actually build and design an online course that many of them have gone on to teach for MSU Great Falls. So it serves our purposes as well as just the faculty development. A few other things I'll share. 1/3 of our enrollment, total enrollment, is through online. Interestingly, 2/3 in the summertime is through online coursework. Many of those students are non-degree seeking with us, but degree seeking with other campuses in the Montana University system. And so it's kind of an interesting thing. Last year, we generated just over 16,000 credit hours through online learning, and then a similar amount in non-credit online learning through some of our partners in extended learning. 3 of our most successful completely online programs are actually taught by faculty that do not live in Great Falls. We have a faculty member, a tenure track faculty member in Maine who directs our health information programs. We have a tenured faculty member in Idaho who oversees our medical billing and transcription programs, and we have just hired a faculty member who teaches for us from Helena. So we've certainly been successful in recruiting faculty outside of Montana even. We're currently working on numerous articulation agreements with our 4-year campuses right now. In fact, I've been working with Interim Provost Young at MSU Billings on a 2+2 bachelor or business degree that would take our online business degree coursework and articulate to an online 4-year business degree. And I think there's some considerable growth opportunity there. And then just maybe a couple of comments about dual enrollment online. We currently have 86 faculty who are OPI licensed and either with Class 8 or Class 4 traditional license. And we have approximately 25 interlocal agreements with high schools around the state of Montana, primarily for online dual credit. This fall, we launched a partnership, a pilot project with Montana Digital Academy, and even with a quick ramp up, I think we ended up with about 30 students high school students who enrolled in our college courses through that partnership, and really looking at scaling that this spring, hopefully. So we feel like we're sort of continuing a long trend at MSU Great Falls and really grabbing onto the power of online learning. Still have lots to do, but we think we're on the right track. Thank you.
Thank you. President Engstrom.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, let me make a few comments about the UM side, and I'll focus my comments on what's happening here on the Missoula campus, and then ask my colleagues to add in on their campuses as well. But let me start just very briefly with our numbers, and then go on to 3 or 4 areas of concern and emphasis in which we've made pretty significant investments in the last several years. So as of this semester, in the fall of 2010, we're currently offering 211 course sections in an online mode. We have over 4,000 students enrolled in those sections, 793 FTE of enrollment right now, which is a pretty hefty, that'd be about 7 to 8% of our total FTE, I guess, would be online, and that represents a doubling over the past 2 academic years, actually. So it's a big growth area for us. What are some of the areas of concern in which we've made investments? So the first is student retention and student satisfaction in the online world. So to get to Regent Barrett's point, we have begun a campus-wide audit of our web-based services for online students, and that's being done in collaboration with the admissions office and the Office for Student Success that we started a year ago. So that audit is designed to identify areas where these student-based or these student web-based services can be improved, things like advising and financial aid information, the kinds of things that we ought to do a better job of tracking students to on our websites. We've recently approved funding to put in specifically an online academic advisor position in our advising center so that our students have someone who specializes in online work that they can contact as an advisor. As Joe Schaefer just said, we have a course targeted at students, C&I 195, called Exploration of Online Learning, and so it's a course specifically designed for students to learn how to be good online learners, and that's beginning to be a pretty popular course. Incorporated into that course would be input from our undergraduate advising center, from the library, and from our writing center on campus. And so we're trying to integrate all of those student services into that online course for students so they become better learners. Then in the area of faculty professional development, we've had a number of things going on. One of those things over the past several years, just as a way of encouraging faculty members to convert courses into an online mode, has been an upfront stipend, if you will, to convert a course or to develop a course into an online course. But that stipend depends upon those faculty members participating in a series of workshops aimed at improving the development of their online course, and so they only qualify for the stipend if they complete this series of workshops through our School of Extended and Lifelong Learning. Then in another attempt at faculty development, our School of Extended and Lifelong Learning here began 2 or 3 years ago an Extended Learning Institute, and Tom Gibson was very involved in helping them design and put that on. And so that began as a Missoula professional development program in 2008, but the next year it went system-wide. And so in that second one, it had 166 registrants that represented virtually every school in Montana, including some of the community colleges and tribal colleges as well. Now next year, MSU Bozeman is going to host that conference, so it truly has become a system-wide effort now, very collaborative, and I'm sure that the attendance will be even higher in this next one. Then there is also a designing and managing online discussion group that takes place as part of our newly reconfigured faculty development office. So that faculty development office has put out a program of faculty development opportunities covering a wide range of areas, but one of those areas is in online learning, and so they held some sessions specific to online learners this fall. And then I'd like to mention our transition within the affiliation of our learning management system. And so we had the 4 campuses on the side had been working fairly independently on their learning management systems. Some of us use Blackboard in some form. We have all, as a 4-campus affiliation, moved to this open source software called Moodle, and as a 4-campus affiliation, entered into a contract with a vendor, Moodle Rooms, that supplies and backs up with service this open source software. So that's a really good move on our part. I think MSU, you did that as a group of campuses a year or so ago with Desire to Learn, I believe you took.
Yes, we all the MSU campuses utilize the learning management system Desire to Learn that we've integrated to 4 campuses as best possible to utilize a common platform for the offering of our online courses.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And then I would just like to mention 2 other forms of reaching out to other populations of students that aren't necessarily online, although online is becoming a bigger part of that. You, I believe, have all heard of our MOLLI program, the Montana Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, which is designed to reach out to students who are 50 years of age and older. It has been extremely popular. And we have well over 1,000 members now. Those are people who have signed up for those courses. We already qualified for $1 million endowment from the Osher Foundation, and we're working on that second $1 million endowment because of the popularity. And so, and even there, some of those courses are beginning to move into an online mode as well. And then, of course, you will hear later, and you heard a little bit already this morning about the Bitterroot College program. And while most of that work is on-site down in Hamilton, again, we're incorporating to an increasing extent an online portion of that. So those are some of the things that have been going on to address some of the areas of concern that we have. And again, I would invite my colleagues to add what is going on some of their campuses.
Chair Christians, Regent McLean, 3 years ago, Montana Tech devoted funds to hire a distance learning coordinator with the understanding that every year I would have to go back before the budget committee to justify the position. Suffice it to say, it's become easier and easier every year. Our distance learning coordinator supports our distance programs in Helena, supports our online industrial hygiene degree, is now supporting the health information technology program, as well as our work with the affiliation with the University of Nevada, Reno in our chemical dependency program. So, thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, our distance learning program includes not only online courses, about 50 a semester, but also face-to-face courses for our early childhood program in 7 locations around the state. We have about 600 students enrolled in online courses, and that has increased by about 50% in the last couple of years. In terms of support, we have added a position in instructional design, and the word from the people in that program is that we need to add another one.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, in an effort to be efficient with time, ditto to everything that's been said.
Perfect. I think we'll move on to at least the award portion of the transfer initiative. We'll work our way through that, and then we'll take a quick break. We're a little over schedule already, and I think we'll do that piece and then move on to the Budget Administrative Committee meeting.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the update portion of this Regent Christian will take 10 seconds.
All right.
Common Course numbering has now processed 7,000 undergraduate courses. In other words, faculty councils have reviewed these courses and determined their equivalency and renamed them. We have a website, as you all know, and if Summer can click the drop-down list there, you'll see the number of disciplines that are up there. There's over 50. 7,000 courses represent 70% of our undergraduate courses. This is a huge and daunting task, and needless to say, there are numerous people that have contributed to this. Of course, Dr. McGregor leading the way, the hundreds, if not thousands of faculty that have worked on this. It couldn't be done without them. This award that I'm about ready to present is the Regents Award for Excellence, is not to the academic side of the house that made Common Course numbering. It's more to the IT or registrar side. When 2 years ago, when the system had swallowed the pill that we are going to Common Course number, there were some pretty stressful meetings we went through. Some of those meetings with the registrar and IT folks were basically, how are we going to be able to do this? How much work is this actually going to entail? When we're talking about 7,000 courses and every one of those courses has to be changed in our system by hand, that's man hours upon man hours that we don't actually know if we're going to be able to do it. And in one of those meetings, where I was unfortunate to be sitting actually at the head of the table, a guy to my right kept saying, "We can do it." He could figure out a way to do this, that we would be able to automate the upload of the changes out of Excel files into Banner. So what that means is that on at least one campus, which I thought he was talking about, it ends up being all of the campuses, that he'd be able to write a program that would go grab those Excel files and then upload them into Banner, changing all of the different places in Banner where that course needed to be changed to its new number. This sounds probably over technical and probably not that big of a deal, but literally to estimate the amount of man hours and money that one person saved the system, not to mention it was really the catalyst for that one thing that was going to trip us up. He basically figured it out, and not only did he figure it out for the UM campuses, he was able to deliver it to the rest of the campuses around the system, and now for every discipline that's Common Course numbered, they run this program which automatically uploads the data into Banner and changes those course numbers. Literally over hundreds of thousands of dollars saved because of this one person. And that person, who I'm speaking of, is Tim Ehrman. He's a programmer in the UM IT office, and a truly excellent person to work with. And with that, I'll read this award. And probably the only downfall is that I'm surrounded by maroon and the award is in blue. This is the Regents Award for Excellence, presented to Tim Ehrman, with many thanks for your dedication to the Montana University System Common Course numbering effort. Tim.
I'm glad I was able to contribute to the success of the transfer initiative. I learned a lot more about Banner in doing it, because I had to get down into all the tables and figure out just how Banner was doing it. But it was a challenge that I'm glad I took. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. We appreciate your efforts. Members of the board, we'll take a break and start up again at 10:30, and we'll move to the Budget Committee at that time. We're ready to start, and we're going to move to the Administrative Budget Oversight Committee. All the committee members are present. Regent Buchanan.
Thank you, Chairman. Christian, we have a pretty meaty agenda. Obviously, no action will be taken today. However, we anticipate quite a few questions and discussion to a couple of items, so we'll try to go through them pretty quickly. I would want to make a couple of comments real quick related to kind of budgeting posture and whatnot. I mean, obviously, we find ourselves in an optimistic position as we see the details of the governor's budget laid out yesterday, and much different than some of the forecasts that we had discussed and whatnot. I do want to stress that I think this board still has it very incumbent upon us to continue to be extremely diligent and focused on many of the initiatives that we put in place in preparation for a declining budget situation. For one reason, one, it's a proposal, but two, I think there's some strategic advantages within those initiatives that we've been talking about. So strongly encourage us to keep those in mind. Moving right into the consent agenda item, Deputy Commissioner Robinson, please kick us off.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I did want to just make a couple brief comments regarding the revised operating budget items that you see on the agenda. These particular items are coming forward in connection with the growth in enrollment that you saw earlier on the enrollment report. I would like to indicate that, you know, when we do have the increased enrollment, obviously there is tuition revenue that flows along with that. But there are also costs that are required to provide the services to those additional students. And as you'll notice on the revised items, there are presentations of what the campuses are expecting to, how they expect to utilize that revenue. And there are direct costs. Certainly additional sections of classes are necessary to provide the services, quality services to students. There are a number of other indirect costs that campuses will also experience, but I think the campuses have really taken a fairly conservative approach to dealing with this tuition revenue in terms of funding those direct costs, recognizing the uncertainties that we have in front of us regarding state funding, not only for the next biennium, but you know, into the future. The issues regarding the sustainability of those enrollment increases. You know, very happy to see this significant positive starting point in terms of the governor's proposal for funding for higher education, and we need to do everything that we can to justify and support that as we move into the legislative arena. But also in the proposals the campuses have with the tuition is they're all setting a certain portion of that aside in a reserve fund to be able to help manage the fiscal situations that they have in front of us. And I think that is a very wise and financially prudent approach to dealing with those revenues at this particular point. And I would like to commend the campuses for that.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Robinson. And as Clay just pointed out, or Chairman Christian pointed out, we are in a situation where the enrollment numbers have elevated the demands on this system considerably. And even this optimistic budget proposal is, we've got to weigh the demands that our system continues to get as they grow and continue to grow. So I appreciate and support your comments, Deputy Commissioner Robinson. Into the consent agenda. Item A, Montana Family Education Savings Program. Amendments to the policy. I don't know who we have from OCHI's staff to talk about that.
Regent Buchanan, on the consent agenda, we place those items there that if there are any items that the board members would like to pull off of that for further discussions or questions, we can provide that. I know we have individuals available here to provide some information on that item, but if there are no particular questions, we can just move on to action items.
Yeah, let's do that. Is any member of the board interested in removing or pulling out any of the items on the consent agenda for further discussion at this point? Any member of the campuses or OCHI? Great. Well, we will move on to action items. Action item number A is coming out of MSU Bozeman, the Solar Observatory. This is kind of an interesting project, and I know Mr. McCoy is ready to brief us on it. Tom.
Thank you, Chairman Buchanan. Thanks for the opportunity to do a little brief. This is going to be very brief. You have a very robust agenda. Just as a quickie background here, what we're requesting is just to have your blessing for us to go forward and submit a proposal to AURA, the Association of Universities Doing Research in Astronomy, to be the host campus for the combined National Solar Observatory, that they're doing a competitive bid process, and we have to put together not only relative to a facility, but also a lot of programmatic details of how Bozeman would be an ideal place to house the National Solar Observatory. We've had a long-standing, excellent relationship with the NSO, currently based in 2 locations, Sunspot, New Mexico, and Tucson, Arizona. And what we are going to propose is they make a permanent move to an on-campus site in Bozeman which would offer great synergies not only for us, but for them. This would be a fantastic addition to the campus. We would be bringing in somewhere between 30 and 40 PhDs at the outset that do work in everything related to the sun. And basically, one of the reasons why they would even consider coming to Bozeman is because we have an internationally recognized solar physics group within our physics department. What we're asking for today is just to, as it points out in the item, is to be able to go forward and include a potential proposal, and it's only potential, for the NSO to be located in a facility that Montana State University would actually take out a bond in order to then pay for the facility. We would own the facility, and then the NSO would enter into 5-year renewable lease in order to fund and pay for not only the lease, but also for the O&M for as long as they would be housed on the Bozeman campus. The NSO has been in existence for 50 years. It's not likely to go away. One of the biggest developments in terms of why they want to move is on their 2 locations currently, they have very little interaction with the campuses. What they want is to have a very significant interaction, to be able to be mentors for graduate students, for undergraduate students, and basically be very integrated into a university campus. That's what we're going to try to propose to them. If we are even preliminarily selected, it goes through a very long process of a couple of years before a final agreement would come back to the board that would be able to say, here's what we want to do, basically issue bonds for approximately $15 million, and here's the lease agreement. And at that time, the board would have to approve it as well as the governor. So I stand here and ready to answer any questions if you have any questions.
Any questions from members of the board? Mr. Barrett.
Not a bit of question, but I echo what you said. When I read this, this is a pretty exciting proposal. Were this to come to pass, this would be a significant development for the campus and economic development for the state.
Other comments or questions? I have a couple. Regent Borthel.
I just wanted to clarify that that was a 5-year renewable lease, so every 5 years it comes up to contract.
Yes, and that's because Aura is basically, they're the managing, they're a 501c3 based in Washington, D.C., and the money actually comes from the National Science Foundation. So what the National Science Foundation does is through a cooperative agreement, team up with Aura. Aura becomes the manager of the project, but the National Science Foundation cannot enter into leases for longer than a 5-year duration.
Great, thank you.
Dr. McCoy, a couple questions. Who are other likely bidders for this project? I understand that we're given authority to go bid. Who are other likely bidders in this?
Well, we're just as close to 100% certain as possible that the University of Colorado at Boulder and that New Mexico State University will be submitting for sure. And there have been talk about 4 other sites, UC Berkeley, one site down in the southeast, and so on. The thing to remember is the location doesn't make any difference because everything is done virtually. The telescope that's being built is actually being built in Hawaii. So it'll all be run, monitored, data gathering, et cetera, will all be done remotely. So really, I mean, this thing could be, the location for the NSO could be anywhere, basically. So we've got some very stiff competition, and I don't even want to put a probability or the likelihood that we would at least be preliminarily selected as a site. But I think the one thing we feel we have that is this aspect of people that have already interacted with the NSO scientists based on our campus, so they know us. A number of them have been on our campus over the years. We've had great interaction with the National Solar Observatory right at the leadership level on down. So that's what we're trying to hope that we can gain, and that also we're hoping that we can put together a document that would make it from a cost-effective basis, running the numbers in terms of what we'll put in the proposal, that we will also be competitive in that arena.
Great. And following up on Regent Bornpaul's question about the 5-year leases, it seems that the NSO has a pretty consistent track record of keeping a relationship with those entities for much longer than just that lease, period.
That's absolutely correct. And in fact, with what is happening in Hawaii is presently under construction. And so what they want to be able to do is come online the same time the telescope is completed, the construction of this, what's called the Advanced Technology Solar Telescope. that they finally received their final funding from the National Science Foundation this past spring. So that's why they're finally able to go forward and call for proposals. My guess is that the NSO is going to be in existence for a long time when you look at the millions upon millions of dollars they're investing in Hawaii to build this telescope.
Great.
We do have a fallback if it doesn't. I mean, if they were not to renew.
Great. Regent Christian. Chairman Buchanan, is there, you don't have to rebid though on each renewal. We just have to enter into a renewal agreement with them. Once you have the project, you have it.
Yes. I mean, just like probably anything else, if we were treating them poorly or something, which is not going to happen. Otherwise, it's been in Tucson. It's just been every 5 years. It's been renewed once they were selected as a site years and years ago.
Other questions or comments? Is it the sense of the committee to move this forward tomorrow? I see heads nodding. Great. Thank you, Dr. McCoy.
Thank you.
Second item, item B, authorization of the MSU Bobcat Stadium end zone project and related financing. Thank you much.
Yeah, Chairman Buchanan wanted to introduce on behalf of Montana State University the president and CEO of the MSU Foundation, Michael Stevenson, who will speak to this issue.
Thank you. Chairman Buchanan, Chairman Christian, Chancellor Stearns, and members of the Board of Regents, I appreciate this opportunity to present and respond to the committee's questions regarding this project. My name is Michael Stevenson. I'm the interim president and CEO of the Montana State University Foundation. Before I begin, I'd like to introduce a few other MSU Bozeman representatives and project participants that are here with us today in case you would have questions for them as well. First, we have Amanda Deal, who is the vice president of our student body, Hallie Anderson, who's the president of ASMSU Senate, Adele Name, who is the ASMSU senator, and then Carl Nystrom, who is the president of the Student Alumni Association and member of the Student Athletic Advisory Council. Also with us is the director of athletics, Peter Fields, and the vice president of administration and finance, Craig Roloff, and the vice president of student success, Alan Yarnell. On behalf of President Cruzado, Montana State University, our students, alumni, donors, and friends, we come before this committee today to provide a status report on the Bobcat Stadium end zone project and to ask for your consideration in moving this effort forward. As stated in item 2011, MSU is seeking the Board of Regents approval to construct a new end zone in Bobcat Stadium, as well as authorization to contribute financing toward the project in the amount of $4 million. This is a two-part proposition. First, approval of this item would authorize Montana State University to replace the existing grandstands in the south end zone of Bobcat Stadium with a new end zone, adding 3,500 to 5,200 seats to Bobcat Stadium. As mentioned in October by President Cruzado, Bobcat football game days attendance has improved considerably over the past 5 years, leading to sellout as well as oversold events in the recent past. Since 2006, ticket sales have averaged 99% of the stadium's capacity. This past season, ticket sales have averaged 104% of the stadium's capacity, and Bobcat Athletics has accommodated this growth of demand through the use of temporary bleachers and standing room only tickets. With the approval of this item, Montana State University and the Montana State University Foundation will construct a new end zone that will achieve the following objectives. First, it will increase access for students. Second, it will increase affordable access for our community. Third, it will increase scholarships for student athletes. And fourth, it will improve the financial strength of Bobcat Athletics. The second part of this item, if approved, will authorize Montana State University to secure financing in the amount of $4 million. These funds would be used to match donor dollars given in support of this project. Upon approval, Montana State University will begin exploring appropriate financing options. Bobcat Athletics is prepared to repay this loan over 15 years using the revenues generated by the stadium expansion. The stadium expansion is estimated to cost between $8 million and $10 million. An $8 million project will provide new and expanded grandstands in the south end zone with a lower concourse that connects the east and west sides of the stadium. A full $10 million project would fully bowl the southern end zone. The graphic that you see on the screen here today is the $10 million proposition. Project costs that exceed $8 million will be addressed exclusively by private dollars or donor dollars. This past Tuesday, it was confirmed that over $4 million has been raised in support of this project. Approval of this item would match these dollars up to $4 million. And I have to tell you that the momentum with this project is absolutely unbelievable. Students, alumni, friends continue to rally behind this project and President Cruzado's call to action. This morning, I had the pleasure of informing President Cruzado that in the last 72 hours, over $875,000 have been contributed in addition to the $4 million already raised. This brings the $10 million proposition within reach. She affirmed this morning that Montana State University will be going for two, so to speak, and has set a new goal at $10 million. Favorable action by this committee and the Board of Regents will guarantee a newly expanded stadium by 2011 football season and bring our campaign total to over $9 million. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Michael? Regent Hamilton.
Thank you, Chairman Buchanan. I have about 4 questions here. Is there any remaining debt on the previous stadium projects?
Yes, there is.
And how much is that? What's the revenue source and what's the timeline for paying that off?
Regent Hamilton, if you wouldn't mind, I may ask Peter Fields to come forward and talk about the previous or the 1997 bond initiative that you're talking about.
Good morning. The annual debt service on the stadium currently is $630,000 annually. The revenues are raised through sales of the current suites and ticket sales in the stadium. The bond, I believe, goes through 2023.
Thank you. The next question is, and I think I know the answer to this, but I want to just be sure. Are the student athletic fees part of the pledged athletic revenues in this project?
They're not part of the pledged athletic revenues. They're part of to create the construction, but in the total bond indenture, they are part of the pledge.
Okay. So they're pledged to pay off the bond indenture.
They're just one piece. They're not used to pay off the bond indenture. We have an agreement with we came to an agreement with the students that we would not use the fee if to pay off the indenture.
Oh, so they're for the 15 years of the payout on the loan, you will not use student athletic fees to cover that obligation? Is that correct?
That's our intent, yes.
Okay. And then how much of your money raised to date is cash in hand or in-kind contribution? How much of it is pledged or accounts receivable?
I'd have to get the exact statistics, and I can forward those to you this afternoon. I would anticipate that by the end of this fiscal year, knowing that many of the donors who have pledged intend to make their first payment within the calendar year, I would anticipate that over 20% of what's been pledged will be in cash by December 31st, and the balance would be in pledges. No in-kind contributions are considered in the total that we're reporting at this time.
And from your experience from the gifting side, do all of your pledges materialize, or what percentage of your pledges materialize?
The industry standard is about a 2 to 2.5% rate of attrition with unfulfilled commitments. The business plan that we are using moving forward is estimating a 5%, so we we're looking at a 4 to 5% rate of attrition only because the build on this project is going to happen so quickly that the 5-year commitments, those donors will be sitting in the stadium and will be fulfilling their commitments for 4 additional years, though the end zone has already been complete. So we're calculating based on 4%.
And then my last question, it sounds like you are planning on using a continued campaign for private donations if the revenues and the seat sales don't materialize. Is that correct?
Well, exactly. Through the balance of this year, there's going to be a call to action to everyone who considers themselves to be a Bobcat. We have $1 million more to raise in order to hit the $10 million goal and to fully realize the full scope and scale of the end zone. As it relates with the project, the design team has been contracted, the construction team has also been contracted, and we wait for the decision of the Board of Regents today and tomorrow in order to move that process forward. And by mid-December, we'll have developed the estimates for the full scope and scale of the project, and we will also know what we will have as far as cash. And that entire team knows and understands that they have to keep the scope of the project within those financial boundaries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Regent Hamilton. Regent Barrett.
Yeah, I want to say a couple things. First, and you have to, since I live in Bozeman, I'm aware of this, but and maybe you've seen the same in buildings and places around the state, the interest and excitement level generated by this project it's hard to calculate. It's unbelievable. And interestingly, there's a corollary interest just in the university. There's a whole excitement about, certainly in Bozeman, and not just about athletics. I mean, I love all this, but I'm not, deeply involved in athletics as some. But there's just a tangible sort of wrapping of the community's arms around the entire university, which to a surprising level. But I had some of the same questions that you did, so just a little fuller answer to what somebody here asked. Yes, though, I checked on the debt payments on the current bonds, and yeah, they've been current, but also those revenues are met by the ticket sales and the stadium skybox sales. But what Director Fields, in his modesty, probably didn't mention that those revenues actually exceeded the debt obligations by 100% in the past years. So there's a great margin. We had way more revenues than the debt obligation was. And then I guess I'll just leave it at that. Obviously, they'll have to raise the money. My observation watching them raise the money is that they will get the money, which would be $6 million plus to do the $10 million project. I suspect probably before this month is out, but that's pure speculation. But I'm just observing what's happened. It's been surprising, pleasantly surprising.
Other regents, comments or questions? Mr. Christian. Chairman Buchanan, the only question remaining is, where is President Cruzado? She's been absolutely thrilled with this project and is ecstatic about it, and she is a fairly private person, and we haven't made too much of it, but President Cruzado had a small medical procedure done. She's on medical leave. She is likely to be here tomorrow, and I just think her biggest concern about possibly not being here today was missing the stadium presentation. So I think it's worth noting this is something that she's just been incredibly pleased and surprised with the way this has moved forward, and the support in the community is tremendous, and I know that she desperately wants to be here. We look for her return tomorrow, but all is well. The procedure's actually been done, and she's more than fine, just waiting for the green light to travel, and we'll be here soon. But she's very pleased with this project, and she said that the other good thing about having the medical procedure done is that the doctors have confirmed her blood does flow blue and gold.
Yeah, she's flying right now. She's on her way.
Any questions or comments from campus leadership? Any public comment on this item? I guess I'd just say both Michael, relatively new in his position, and Dr. Cruzado, his recent hire and whatnot, the energy and the success that you're having has been outstanding, and I understand that you're pledging the same type of conference championship streak that they've enjoyed here in Missoula after we complete this, and I'm looking forward to seeing
All part of the
that.
team, all part of the team.
Thank you very much, Michael.
You're welcome, thank you.
Moving on to item C, also recognizing that the honeymoon period for new hires really offers the opportunity to present lots of proposals. MSU is proposing item number C, Renee Library renovation. Joe, I don't know who's here to speak to that.
Yes, Chairman Buchanan, I would like to ask our Vice President for Administration and Finance, Craig Roloff, to speak to this item, as well as if we could also combine that maybe with the following item on the Leon Johnson renovation, to speak to both of those items here. So.
Chairman Buchanan and Regents, the library has they have attempted to continually enhance their facilities and their equipment over the years, and the way that they do that is they will squirrel away funds at the end of a fiscal year into a plant fund for their next project. About a year and a half ago, they completed one project where they had movable shelving installed in the basement in a large area, and what that did is it allowed them to nearly double the capacity they had for certain government documents and things like that because of the installation of that shelving. And so they're ready to move forward with their next project, and this is the renovation of the library commons. You'll see the description of it. It's about a $500,000 project, or at least that's the cap on this, and it's to enhance the main floor of the library and provide additional student space. The details are in your document. I don't want to walk through that line by line, but certainly I'd answer any questions if you had any.
Thank you, Dr. Roloff. Any questions or comments from members of the board? Regent Pornthal.
Just to add to this conversation, last year I served as the student body president at Montana State University, and the library was in constant communication with ASMSU as we ran a tutorial service out of our office. And they came to us and got together some of our tutors and really started working towards what can make the best space for students to be able to learn together and to support tutoring within the library as well. So students have been very involved in this conversation on the library side.
Thank you, Regent Bornfall. Any comments from campuses? Public comment on this item? And I guess I will include the previous item because I did not ask the committee members. Is it our sense that we'd move it forward for approval tomorrow? Great, thank you. Moving on to item D, Mr. Roloff.
Mr. Chairman, the Leon Johnson renovation, this is it's a real success story for the institution and the Thermobiology Institute. They competed in a highly competitive grant program, and they were able to secure funds for the renovation of the 6th floor. It's amazing how quickly time goes by when you look at, this Leon Johnson was built in the early 70s, and the only money we really spent on it was when we had to replace all of the brick, which really didn't do us a lot of good. And so this is really great news to be able to utilize a substantial grant to enhance one of the floors specifically for the Thermobiology Institute. The primary source of funds are the grant. In addition, something that we try to do whenever we have a grant for facilities or a research grant that is willing to spend funds on our facilities, we try to add some additional funds from our maintenance or our plant funds to kind of do our share, the institution's share for infrastructure improvements. And so this is, we're using a combination of funds, but primarily the reason that this is happening is because of the grant that we received.
Thank you, Mr. Roloff. Any questions or comments, concerns from members of the board? Any campus comments? Public comments on this item? Seeing none, is it the sense of the committee to move it forward for approval tomorrow? I see heads nodding. Thank you, Dr. Roloff. Moving on to U of M matching funds for the Montana Technology Enterprise Center, known as MonTech. I don't know, Mr. Derringer, Mr. Engstrom, who's going to handle that?
Regent Buchanan, I'll go ahead and make the presentation, and others are in the audience to answer questions if they arise. We've talked quite a bit in the last few years about the impact of the university system on the economy of Montana and how important that is to our future. And we do that through a variety of ways, of course. One of those is workforce development. So much of the conversation we've had about two-year education and so on in the last few years really has been aimed at workforce development. The other side of the equation, though, is job creation. And we have a wonderful opportunity before us here as the University of Montana to put in place a major company that we hope becomes a major employer as we go forward in Montana. We have an agreement with the Missoula Area Economic Development Administration for an operation called MonTech, which is located right across the river from us here. MonTech is an incubator facility, essentially, where new companies, fledgling companies, can get started. We have a company, right now called Rivertop Renewables that is housed in MonTech. Rivertop Renewables is a company that is experiencing tremendous success and growth, and so they want to expand the facility, renovate the facility over at MonTech so that to accommodate their growth, and they want us to partner with them. We have submitted in cooperation with them a grant application to the Economic Development Administration to do renovation. That grant application would bring $1.75 million to the table, but would require us to contribute a similar amount, $1.75 million, to the renovation. And so we want to move forward with this. We have a way of financing this by tapping into the grant leave pool that is generated from indirect cost revenue and the benefits pool from grant activity. And so we have a cash balance there that would allow us to front the money and then use indirect cost revenue over the course of the next 10 years to repay that investment. And so we would like permission to move forward and make that investment and help this company really contribute to the future of Montana's economy.
Thanks, President Engstrom. Questions or comments from members of the board? Regent Barrett.
Mr. Chairman, President Engstrom, I need you to help me understand this. I'm looking at the drawing that's at the end of this, but if I understand the drawing correctly, the blue part that says pilot plant, is that what's existing and the rest will be new?
Vice President Derringer, would you come up and answer that question, please? You very quickly exceeded my capacity here.
Regent Barrett, could you please repeat that question? I couldn't hear it.
Well, I'm just looking at the drawing, and they can scroll that page up. The very last page of that is the drawing. and there's a key that shows right there. The stuff marked in blue says pilot project, which I assume is probably what exists today. And are you building that whole building, or is it already exist and you're remodeling it?
Okay, Regent Barrett, members of the board, the building exists today. So what we are going to do is renovate about half of the building to put in more laboratories, more offices. We will upgrade the heating and ventilation system, electrical upgrades, plumbing upgrades, and then we will add the pilot plant footprint, which is over there on the right-hand side, of about 1,500 square feet. So the vast majority of this money is just to retrofit an existing structure.
And how much of this structure will that company occupy?
Half. Half of the entire building.
Okay, because my concern was, and I couldn't understand it from the presentation, I had the impression that they would have been occupying the whole thing, which would have, of course, eliminated your incubator function.
Regent Barrett, we have a number of other tenants out there at Montauk.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Regent Barrett. Other questions, comments from members of the board? Campuses? Public comment related to this item? Mr. Derns or President Engstrom, thank you.
Thank you.
Is it the sense of the committee that we move it forward for approval? So be it. The final action item of the day, item F, a policy statement on tuition out of OCHI. So I'll pass it to Deputy Commissioner Robinson.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to transfer this to President Engstrom, but just wanted to make a couple of comments. This particular issue regarding the tuition for graduate assistants has been in the discussion stage for really 2 years now. It was brought forward prior to the '09 session as an initiative to look for funding, and we have been in the midst of looking at studying the waiver situation within the university system since that point in time. And as I think an outcome of those two concepts, we're bringing this particular recommendation forward to the board to consider, and basically it's really hardly any additional cost would be absorbed by the campuses regarding this particular proposal, but it I think provides more transparency in terms of graduate assistants and how those positions are being funded within the university system. And I'll let President Engstrom provide a little more detail in terms of how that operates on the Missoula campus, and perhaps Provost Fedock will also make some comments regarding the Bozeman campus on this issue.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Robinson. Regent Buchanan, members of the board, we're very excited to see this proposal come before you. As Deputy Commissioner Robinson said, this is something we've been working on together, MSU and UM, for the past couple of years. It really goes to our competitiveness for graduate students. And this morning when Tyler Trevor showed our enrollment growth, I didn't realize that until he showed it, but the one category of students that did not grow was non-resident graduate students, and so this gets right to the heart of that issue. We currently are a state that still charges non-resident graduate students who are on a graduate assistantship the full rate of tuition, and either those individual students pay that, or we do some tuition waivers for that non-resident portion, or our grants and contracts pay that non-resident portion. And that puts us in a less than competitive position for attracting good graduate students to our programs from around the country. And so what we would like to do here is to adopt this policy that would allow us to set the tuition rate for these non-resident graduate students at the resident rate. We are not calling them residents. We are simply trying to set a tuition rate that is equal to the resident tuition rate. And we feel that that will have a tremendous advantage in terms of our being able to tell the rest of the world that we want good graduate students here in Montana. It does mean a little bit of financial manipulation on the campuses in that some of that tuition, as I mentioned, is now paid by grants themselves. And so that money comes to the central tuition pool, which then gets reallocated out in our usual budgeting process. And so that if we adopt this, then that tuition money will no longer come to the central tuition pool on our campuses. The money is still on the campuses, though, in the form of those grants and still available to us to accomplish the research mission of the institution. So there's no net loss in revenue. And in fact, what we truly believe is going to happen here is that by becoming more competitive, we will begin to attract more graduate students. On our campus, we've done the analysis. It would take fewer than 50 new graduate students to make up the money difference that this means to us on our campus. And Provost Fedak will make a comment, I think, to a similar effect on his campus. So we just think this is a great recruiting tool at the graduate level for us, and we would like to see this adopted.
Yes. Chairman Buchanan, members of the board, President Engstrom has well articulated the reasons for this particular item, and as he had indicated, University of Montana and Montana State University have been working in collaboration on this, and we strongly support it from the Bozeman campus for all the reasons that he so well articulated. And we similarly have done an analysis to assess what that financial impact will be. As President Engstrom indicated, those dollars still remain within the university. However, they will be utilized in other ways other than supporting the general operating budget in terms of that tuition revenue. It is a relatively minor amount that we are prepared to deal with. Certainly the huge advantage will be our ability to become more competitive for outstanding graduate students, and being one of the strategic goals of the university and of the university system to grow our graduate programs. This is a board item that we feel is very much needed, and we strongly support it from a Montana State University Bozeman perspective. Thank you.
Comments or questions from members of the board? Regent Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions. Probably the first one for Deputy Commissioner Robinson. Is the in-state graduate tuition currently set at the cost of graduation, cost of education for graduate students, so that there is no state support that flows to a graduate student?
Mr. Chairman, Regent Hamilton, know that the tuition for resident graduate students, I believe on the campuses, is set at 120% of the undergraduate resident tuition. So it is less than, for resident graduate students, the tuition paid is less than the cost of education for those particular students. So there is a state contribution to the education of those students.
And with approval of this proposal, then would that same state support flow to a non-resident student?
With this proposal, I do not believe that changes if the calculations that I've seen in terms of the financial impact on the campuses is very minimal with this particular change, because for these graduate assistants, there is already existing financial support, really doing almost the same thing in terms of perhaps using a waiver to reduce the tuition from the non-resident level down to the resident graduate level, or there is funding that is coming through grants, et cetera, to pay for that type of downward movement in the tuition. So
The net impact, I don't see any real net impact in cost of education on the campus or the allocation of that state funding to resident graduate students.
I'm going to press on this issue just a little bit more, if I could, Mr. Chairman, because I think transparency is important, and I believe that the campuses have the ability to cover this cost. I mean, that really isn't my issue. With their out-of-state tuition revenue alone, they could probably move things around to deal with this. And I'm a little concerned that this was an audit issue from the policy standpoint of an overuse of waivers, and we're addressing the policy issue through a change in tuition policy rather than waiver policy. So I'm just kind of trying to get a handle on the policy implications of this going forward if, for instance, at the undergraduate level, with our various out-of-state programs, we say that it's a percentage of state support that's tied to some kind of a metric that we know, for instance, that there is some state support that goes into WUI, and when we do a budget proposal, that's reflected. With this proposal, and WUI is a waiver, right? I'm trying to get that straight in my mind too, the difference between waivers and scholarships and foregone tuition revenue. But if that's the case and we grant graduate students in-state resident tuition, what are the implications for how we make proposals going forward for student support?
Regent Hamilton, members of the board, let me see if I can get at that. First, on the side, I'm quite confident that we are not in excess of our allowable waiver pool, and so this isn't a mechanism to extend the waiver pool in some way. And Mick, I think I'm correct on that, right? We've been below the allowable percentage, so it's not driven by that at all. I think the other aspect of this, I mean, I'm not sure I can directly answer the cost of education question, but I think a relevant piece of this is that these people are actually coming to us as employees. I mean, they are teaching assistants or research assistants, and so they are doing work for us. And so there is, in that philosophical sense, I think, their own contribution to the cost of education that comes into play here because of the work that they're doing for us. And so I don't believe that, in my mind, that there's any real conflict here in terms of the cost of education issue for doing this, particularly since almost every other state does operate this way, and they all would have a similar philosophical issue behind this.
There's, from Montana State University Bozeman, I'd say similarly, there is the issue of the tuition waiver capacity, but I think it's important to recognize that that's a separate issue here, and that we are, from a Bozeman perspective, feel that this policy change is an appropriate way to assist the institution in our ability to advance in terms of recognizing the role that graduate assistants play in supporting the institution by virtue of their role, and being, once again, consistent with the policy approach that virtually every other state in the country has taken relative to how these students are treated for tuition purposes.
Regent Christian?
Joe just hit on that, but I sort of feel like we could have fairly lengthy philosophical debate about it, but I think in the business world, we make pricing decisions all the time. Some we like, some we don't. The truth of the matter is, I think we believe graduate work, research, development for our economy is important, and if we're going to have Montana in the game on any of these issues, if 47 other states are doing it, it seems like we have to posture ourselves to participate in this arena.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Robinson.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Hamilton, just want to try to clear up the relationship a little bit between the waivers and this proposal for tuition level. And I think you are correct. We did have an audit recommendation regarding the MSU campuses exceeding a 2% threshold that is included in Regents policy. And as we began to study that particular issue, it did come to my attention. I was not really aware of it prior to sitting down and looking at a lot of the detail, that we were utilizing waivers to a significant extent to address the issue regarding graduate assistance. And that approach to that is quite foreign when you compare that to all other states. So I think this particular proposal is really, I think, again, making the situation more transparent and more consistent with most other states within this nation, so that those graduate assistants are being charged the resident tuition level, really as part of their, I think, contribution to the institution. And so rather than including that as that reduction in tuition as a waiver, it is simply setting or allowing the campuses to set a level of tuition for this particular grouping of students, just as we do in, for example, the WUI students. It's a compact to establish tuition level at 150% of resident tuition for students accepted under the WUI program. So it's simply another really threshold, and I think a proper presentation of the use of tuition for that particular group of students. So although there is a connection, it's more of an indirect connection than a direct connection with, it will certainly help us at the Bozeman campus in terms of the 2% issue, but I don't think it solves that. So we have additional work on the Bozeman campuses regarding the 2% issue. The UM campuses are not above that 2% threshold, so it is not a waiver policy issue at all for the UM campuses.
Regent Barrett.
Mostly I'm echoing now what Regent Christian said, but I think philosophically we're doing what we need to do here. That is, we've given these people the responsibility to grow these different segments, and in the graduate segment particularly, and we need to give them the commensurate authority to deal in there. These are one-on-one decisions, application by application, and they need to have the flexibility to meet those rather than try to do that by a broad board policy. That we need to put these kind of decisions in the hands of the managers with whom we've charged making that goal. So I think philosophically we're exactly in the right place. And then if the dollars get out of hand, I don't anticipate they would, but if they would, then that's something we would have to deal with. But we need to give them authority to meet the responsibility we've charged them with.
Any other questions or comments? Regent Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I'm understanding this correctly, this policy would be only applied to that select group of graduate students who are teaching assistants or research assistants. Is that correct? So as employees, you as a campus are going to realize some savings in employee costs by being able to offer these packages to those students. Can you give me an idea of what that would be on your campuses?
Regent Hamilton, members of the board, yes. Let me illustrate this with an example. So let's say that a faculty member writes a grant proposal to the National Science Foundation or some other agency to fund a graduate student. And so if that student is a non-resident graduate student, then the grant pays essentially the stipend itself, the stipend, which is maybe in the area of $20,000, depending, maybe more in some cases, but that depends a little bit on the grant. But the grant would pay the stipend. In addition, the grant would pay all of this non-resident tuition. So now, if the grant only has to pay resident level tuition, that frees up that money that was being used for non-resident tuition to do other things with that grant. And the other things that most likely would be done would be to hire additional graduate students. So for the price it now takes to pay a non-resident graduate student, including the stipend and the tuition, we could actually hire 1.6 or so resident rate students. And so the net effect of this is to really expand our graduate workforce on campus and allow us to do even more research. So that's really the important outcome of this.
Regent Bornfall?
So I just want to make sure that I have this straight in my head. So this isn't giving us the ability to advertise nationally that we are offering graduate school, a grad education at in-state level prices. This is allowing us to see great candidates, and instead of going through a board to give them the waiver, it gives us the ability to say yes instantly.
Regent Board, members of the board, it does allow us to say to prospective students the tuition rate at the University of Montana or Montana State University is now whatever we set the resident tuition rate at next May. I mean, so we can in fact advertise and undertake our recruiting efforts saying right up front the tuition that you or your research mentor would be responsible for is now the resident rate instead of this considerably higher rate. Is that the question you were asking?
Follow up?
But this is for assistants, not just students. This is for teaching aides, teaching assistants, not for grad students per se.
Mr. Chairman, if I could follow up on Regent Bordenpohl's question to you, President Engstrom. The advertising wouldn't just be sort of wide open. It would be assuming that someone comes on board as an employee, a teaching assistant or a research assistant. It is for that subset, that category. Is that correct?
Commissioner Stearns, that is correct.
That's an important distinction then.
It's not for graduate students in general. This is for graduate students who end up on assistantships. But the way graduate recruiting works is it's very departmentally oriented or program oriented. And so graduate students are often in close discussion with the faculty members who are recruiting them into these grant-funded programs in particular. And so that becomes a dialogue very quickly, and the faculty member or that department can say, you come here and this is the tuition situation that you would have as a teaching or a research assistant. Yeah, thank you.
Other comments or questions? I think the only thing I'd ask, and it surfaces with these questions, is I'd like to develop some way for us to track the effectiveness. I don't know what the metrics are, but the ones that come to mind are revenues generated right now in the form of tuition from those folks, that the change or impact on that, expenditures cost to manage that cohort of students, and perhaps enrollment. I don't know, but obviously not at the moment come up with those, but I sure would like to take a snapshot of what we're seeing right now and compare it a year from now. I see this as a little bit similar to the Grow Eastern Montana policy that we just approved about allowing in-state tuition at Miles, and I think that's good of us to try some creative ways to increase enrollment. So perhaps President Engstrom and Mr. Fedock, we can come up with some sort of metric to evaluate the effectiveness of this plan.
Regent Buchanan, we'd be happy to do that. I mean, I think the fundamental metric is really the enrollment of non-resident graduate students. I think that's pretty straightforward, so it'll be easy to report back to you on that, I believe.
Great.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from members of the board? campuses, comments or questions? Yeah, Mr. Marvin.
I have a comment from a faculty perspective, and I strongly support the proposal for a couple of reasons, and one of which is we recruit graduate students in the department I'm in forestry, and it is a very competitive market, and students do look across institutions as to their choices on where they go. And I will be more explicit than President Engstrom in relaying those numbers from the graph that everyone saw this morning, that non-resident graduate students increased by 0.2% and resident by 4.6%, so quite a bit more of an increase. And the other thing that the students on teaching assistants do is they really add to the teaching mission of our various departments and programs. And so anytime that we can increase the value of and the quality of students in those programs. And again, I do a lot of work with the federal government through several of the natural resource management agencies, and choosing a non-resident or a resident student sometimes really is a function of how many students you can pay for on that grant. And so those are very decisions that we make on a fairly regular basis. So I think it's important that we think about that. It fits in nicely with growing graduate programs and your strategic mission.
Thank you, Professor Moisey. Any other comments? Any public comment related to this item? Is this Regent Pease?
Thank you, Chairman Buchanan. I would just say that I'm just hoping this doesn't minimize or erode the opportunity for Montanans for graduate assistantships. I know it will add to the competitive pool, but I'm thinking, I just hope it doesn't damage that opportunity for our own residents.
Maybe add that metric, the growth or impact on in-state assistantships. Thank you, Regent Pease. Since the committee, we move this forward. Great. That concludes action items. We've got about 25 minutes, and we're determined to finish on time for the information items. We'd start with the University of Montana-Missoula biomass project proposal, and Mr. Derninger.
Regent Buchanan's member of the board. Let me just say right up front, this is one of the most complex things that we've taken on in a long time. So what I've done is I've kind of tried to synopsize it very tightly into a couple PowerPoints just so you get a sense of what we're trying to accomplish here. Next slide, please. Okay, biomass gasification is really just a high-tech steam boiler. At the end of the day, it burns wood. Burns it differently, but it burns wood. And we're going to substitute biomass in lieu of natural gas to a very large extent. The plant will be located right next to the current steam plant. It'll be connected to it. And it will, the trucks that fuel the gasifier will come in through the parking lot by the stadium. It will reduce our natural gas consumption by about 80%. And I have a picture here that will depict that here in just a second. And it will also, most substantially, reduce our carbon footprint with just one project by almost 1/4. So it's a tremendous leap forward in terms of making the campus a green campus. Next. Okay, with the economics of natural gas as they stand today and the way we've projected them out for the next number of years, we will save in excess of $1 million a year by switching to woody biomass. Then we'll use those savings to not only retire the debt on the money that we borrow, but also to buy the wood and to operate the plant. And we are also, as you're going to see, although you won't see it in this presentation, we are establishing a risk reserve to make sure that we have money available for any kind of unforeseen thing that might happen either in the biomass market or the natural gas market. And with the help of Dan Villa and the governor's office, we've been allocated $6.7 million worth of what are known as qualified energy conservation bonds, QECBs, and we're in the process, Rosie Keller is, of getting other QECBs from other state agencies. So at the end of the day, we think we'll have $10 million of those bonds amassed for this project. And the interesting thing about that is that the federal government direct pays 70% of the interest on those bonds. So over the course of this bond issue, we will save almost $2 million for having those QECBs available. Okay, for me, this thing breaks down into 4 points of risk. The operating risk, the risk of natural gas, the risk of biomass, and especially in the area of Missoula, you got to make sure your air is really clean. So in the last legislative session, as you read in the handout, there was a law passed that allows institutions such as us to enter into agreements with performance contractors. And what they essentially are people who work in the energy conservation business and guarantee performance of different projects. And so we, after a competitive interview process, we selected McKinstry, and one of their representatives is here today, to be our performance contractor. And they, as part of their business, will guarantee the output of the steam on this plant. So that's the one risk I think we have hedged quite well. Natural gas, we contracted with a company known as Fell and McCord, a national estimator of natural gas, and did a Missoula-specific natural gas forecast for 20 years. And we think that natural gas, although it's momentarily depressed, will return to the highs that we saw here just a couple of years ago. And as we get better, our bottom line gets better. So essentially, as natural gas recovers, we start to make more money on this project. Biomass pricing, we've done extensive work with all of the, not all, but a number of biomass providers in the Missoula area. And we have firm bids available now at the price point we need to have the wood and the quality of the wood that we need. So we feel that biomass is certainly available and is available in the foreseeable future. And then air emissions, we went through an extensive process with this, did a lot of analysis, and have actually added 2 different pieces of equipment to the plant to make sure that the emissions on this plant are fully permittable by the most stringent of standards that we have here in the Missoula area. Next, please. This is just a picture of what we're going to try and accomplish. If the graph as a whole is a day-by-day picture of how we use natural gas on this campus. The blue area is what we will replace with wood. And so as you see, almost 80% of what we're using now in the form of natural gas will be woody biomass. And lastly, okay, this is really about 4 things in our minds. It's about continuing the tremendous success we've had in environmental leadership, especially under the presidency of George Dennison. Economic development, we will add people in the forest, people in the industry to provide the woody biomass to operate the plant, so there will be economic development. Because we are not going after marketable timber, we're going after what's left after timber's been taken out of the forest. We will substantially increase the health of the forest itself. Education, as you read in the paper, we're going to have 2 prongs of education on this. One, we will work with the College of Forestry and Conservation in the area of harvesting wood out sustainably out of lubret forest. And so that'll be a major area for them. And then primarily we are going to have a part of this as the energy technician program within our College of Technology. In fact, there will be a classroom inside the gasification plant. So those students can get right there and get a hands-on feel for what that business is all about. Okay, that completes my presentation, and I've got people from the industry here. I've got a number of people ready to answer any questions you may have, but hopefully I'll be able to answer them. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Derringer. Members of the board, questions or thoughts? When would we anticipate seeing this as a...
Say again, please.
When would we anticipate seeing this as an action item?
Okay. It is our intent after today to come back to this board on the 16th of December at your conference call and ask for really 2 things, the permission to construct and the permission to sell bonds.
Okay. Commissioner Stearns.
Mr. Chairman, if we could jump ahead in case there are members of the public, I've at least gotten emails of interest in public comment that the board may want to hear if there is such. Great. Before the board has further discussion. And I don't know if the people who wrote will also come, but I just think we should check. Thank
That's
you.
worth doing right now. Any comments from campuses or general public? Please come forward and introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Angela Farr, and I work for the U.S. Forest Service in the northern region in an organization called State and Private Forestry. And I appreciate the opportunity to comment today. Our organization has directed a 6-state Fuels for Schools program for a number of years since early 2000s, in which we facilitate and promote the use of wood waste from forest treatments for heat in public buildings and schools particularly. And I wanted to come today and speak in support of the UM's project for a number of reasons. We have had considerable experience over these years, and I believe that Vice President Duringer and his staff have been working closely with us and applied a lot of the lessons learned through that experience. I'm very impressed with their approach and diligence and thoroughness in the way they've approached this project. And the Forest Service in general supports this effort. We funded the DNRC program that has allowed the DNRC, Montana DNRC, to supply the UM with a grant to help with this project. We support this due to our land management needs and challenges. Having a use for the slash, the tops, waste wood, and material that can't be made into boards or other products helps strengthen our overall ability to manage fuels and insects and disease issues. Burning and disposal of this kind of material is required by state law in order to reduce the hazardous fuels conditions associated with forest management activities. And it's becoming more and more difficult for us to do due to air quality considerations as well as weather conditions and the potential for risk for escape of prescribed burning or slush pile burning. So rather than releasing all the energy associated with burning that waste wood and all the carbon associated with that, we'd rather see that material used to capture that energy and displace natural gas, oil, propane, and other fossil fuels with a local renewable fuel source. It provides integrated market conditions that help forest land managers do their work more cost effectively. As folks all know, Smurfit Stone Container Corporation closure last year, we lost our largest market by far in the state for this type of material. And at 20,000 bone dry tons, the UM system would use about a tenth of what Smurfit used just for the energy, the heat and power they generated, or about a 50th of the material consumed by that plant if you include all the feedstock for their linerboard product as well. Still, 20,000 tons is a significant amount and a positive step to helping Montana replace the market lost by Smurfit. With what we're trying to do is really promote a group of smaller, more localized and geographically dispersed markets that will be more viable for the long term. So we see this as a really good step. The commitment to air quality and the approach, again, that the Vice President and his staff have taken are really beneficial to the state and to the Missoula area. So in short, this is the single best thing UM can do for their carbon footprint and do it cost effectively, and we really support the project. Thank you for the opportunity to comment, and I'd be glad to answer questions as well.
Thank you, Mrs. Farr. Any questions? Appreciate your time. Other public comments related to this item? Great. Well, everybody knows, Regent Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a question on one of the bullet points in this item that I'm hoping Mr. Duringer can answer. The bullet point is that the steam plant will be converted to an auxiliary enterprise which bills the cost of utilities to individual users. And I'm wondering if this is, I'm concerned that this might be a shift of the cost of this plant to academic departments and programs. Do they currently pay for the natural gas that they consume so that this would be kind of expense neutral?
Yeah, I actually left one word out of that sentence. This is the new steam plant will be an auxiliary, not the old steam plant. And then what we will do, as we do with many other things, we will just bill out the steam to every user on campus, but through the budget process, we will give them the money to pay that bill. MSU's been doing this for a long time.
Mr. Barrett.
Well, excuse me, well, Lynn, you asked the precise question. One of the ones I was going to ask, but well, let me just start by saying that this is a very significant project. I mean, conceptually, it's a good project. However, it is a significant project, and I think we really need to understand the business plan, and this is a nice PowerPoint presentation, but this isn't a business plan. And I will suggest, I'm not sure approval of something like this will be appropriate for a conference call meeting. I mean, I think this is bigger than that. And there'll be more detailed questions answered. And I'll ask a few now, and they don't need to be answered now. I think this is fair warning so you can get this data together. One of them was just the one Regent Hamilton brought up. that if both of these things become auxiliary, it really sounds like it's either a double dipping or there is no more source of revenue there. You say you now can sell it, but you're getting repaid by it anyway. It doesn't seem like there is a creation of any source of revenue. No matter how you label these, the units are now paying for what they're getting. They're not going to pay any more. And the fact that we shift the names around or the sources around won't create any additional dollars. So I don't see where that is a revenue source. I think it's an interesting accounting mechanism that may tell us more, and that's all well and good. So that'll be a question that will need to be answered going forward. The other thing, just as an aside, when you calculate the carbon footprint that you're going to reduce by 25%, does that include the carbon footprint of the trucks that are hauling the materials to the site? Was that calculated in there?
Regent Barrett, no.
So it doesn't reduce it by 25%. It could actually increase it. But that's neither here nor there, frankly, to the business plan. The other thing that's probably of significant importance is the steam or the production or the quality of this is guaranteed by McKinstry. And McKinstry is an old line company. They're from the Seattle area, if I recall. They used to be located on the peninsula. I don't know if they still are. I actually worked with them way longer ago than most people here would care to remember when I worked with Honeywell. So I know they're a long-standing old line company. But what would be the nature of that guarantee? That is, it would be a guarantee backed by a credit facility, a bond, a CD, or just that's a question I want answered. We don't need an answer today, but that'll be something I expect to see in the business plan is what's the nature, extent, scope of that guarantee, how long-lasting it would be, and how they make good on it, if you will.
Yeah. Regent Barrett, yesterday we had the opportunity to brief our business plan, which is really this big huge pro forma, to Deputy Commissioner Robinson, and I'm hoping that over the next day or two I can get with Regent Buchanan to show it to him too, because it is more complicated than what lends itself to a conference call.
Yeah, and that's my concern, that you want to come and ask for action, and how we're able to analyze that. Certainly you can't do that in a presentation and a call. We will need to fully understand that before we can have such a call.
I understand.
Perhaps Vice President Derringer, you and I can take a first crack at that and then pass on kind of a summary of findings to members of the board well in advance of the 16th.
Yeah, we're prepared to do that.
Great. Any other comments or questions from members of the board? Great, thank you. Thank you, Vice President Derringer. I'm sorry, Mr. Choki.
One question. Rob, I have a question, or maybe a comment, I'm not sure. But we, of course, at Northern are heavily involved in bioenergy and biofuels. And I guess one question I have, in your business plan, have you calculated the amount of money it will take to transport biomass to the project for the number of years that you're looking to have this plant working?
Absolutely. As part of the bids that we went out for, we're looking for 5-year contracts, net of cost of transportation, net of the cost of the fuel, net of wages, net of everything. And we've got a bid in that fits into the business plan of our project.
And that is calculating in terms of your revenue?
Into the cost of fuel.
Income and expense?
Yes, it's all calculated into the cost of a ton of bone-dry wood.
Okay, and also the second part of that is, have you calculated in transportation in regards to the amount of fuel and the emissions that would haul that biomass to the campus?
I believe that was a question Regent Barrett asked, and no, we had not done that calculation yet, but we will. Thank you.
A quick update on the agenda. We're going to try to tackle items B through D prior to lunch, and then Mr. Villa is gracious enough to agree to start us off after the recess and talk about the executive budget summary. So item B, Montana Tech student housing proposal.
Chair Buchanan, members of the board, this information item is a result partially of our Northwest accreditation visit, which happened in April. The team came to campus gave the campus 5 commendations, which we were most appreciative of, and 3 recommendations. One of those recommendations was our practice of requiring freshmen to live in the dorms on campus, yet we didn't have enough dorm rooms for those freshmen. It had been our practice to allow upper-class students to live in the dorms, which would displace freshman students to our off-campus housing facility about 2 miles away. We have taken care of that issue internally. Freshmen are now housed in the 286 beds that we have, but there is a need for additional dorms on campus, so we are in the process of looking at the efficacy of a 100-bed dorm in the cost of about $7 million. So we are continuing analysis of that project, and if the stars align and the numbers work out, we'll be coming forward in the future with the request.
Thank you, Mr. Abbott. Mr. Robinson?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this issue we have as an information item, and it really is, to a certain extent, maybe connected with the biomass project in terms of the funding issue. In order to move forward with this project, residence facility on the campus, there I think would need to be a bond issue in order to finance that. And so this particular issue and also the MSU Western to a certain extent are brought forward with the idea that if a bond proposal would move forward with the biomass, these 2 projects would like to piggyback on that bond issue in terms of the financing at this particular point in time. So brought it forward as an information piece. There's still work going on, and I just have a couple of quick questions, Doug, regarding, did you mention an estimated cost at this point, and did I miss that?
Yeah, our initial figures are about a $7 million project.
And did you just maybe comment on how that would be paid for, what revenue would be utilized for that?
Sure. Our plans are to repay the bonds, revenues from the new dorm, revenues from other pledged auxiliaries, and land grant income not dedicated to the bond repayment.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Robinson. Other questions from Regents? Campuses? Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Abbott. Item C, University of Montana Western House Purchase Proposal. President Story.
Thank you, Regent Buchanan, members of the board. This is a relatively simple and relatively inexpensive proposal from us, and it does go along with the bonding. And it's to purchase a house and some property that we've had our eye on for a number of years in our acquisition zone. We would use it for various kinds of things, probably initially just to go ahead and rent the property and generate that income, but we might take some of it and use it for some parking that we actually need to address as we've had growth. We could put our equine studies program there so that students don't have to bring horses and trailers through a fairly busy street for us and avoid some of that. We could put some of our environmental studies programs and greenhouses on the property and so forth. But it also helps us with the fact that if we should need to come back at some time with residence halls, we really don't have any place to put something like that. And so this is some insurance for the future.
Any comments or questions from Regents? When would we anticipate this project?
Well, the property's on the market now, so if the bond comes through and all those things happen, then we would probably go ahead and make the purchase or propose to you to make the purchase.
Great.
So it's there. And it's been on the market for a while. They've just adjusted the price down.
Familiar story. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, President Story. Mr. Roloff, I think you are presenting the MSU Bozeman student housing proposal.
So, Chairman Buchanan, I think this item on behalf of Montana State will be introduced by our Vice President for Student Success, Alan Yarnell.
Thanks, Mr. Yarnell.
Good morning. Pleasure to be in front of you on this informational item. And to give you a little historical background. About 3 years ago, President Gamble and I asked Vice President Roloff to undertake a study concerning our housing. We were very concerned because parents had been contacting us about the state of the existing housing their children were living in. At that point, we weren't in the enrollment growth mode that we're in today. So we didn't necessarily need immediate housing. At any rate, Craig organized a committee, and you're going to hear that report. You're also going to see photographs of the state of some of our housing. We are going to propose, as you've probably already seen, an eclectic approach to this in terms of renovation and adding a 70-bed suite. That would help us very much in terms of our increasing enrollment. So, without further ado, Vice President Roloff is behind me and will give you the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. To make this brief, I'd like if we could put the pictures up and just run through these while I talk. We're at the point, if you look at the item itself, we're at the point where we are now probably 300 students over what is considered a capacity of our residence halls, and we're at the point where we're moving single students into married student housing areas, and so what that means is we don't have space to accommodate married student housing, or at least all of the demands for married student housing, because of the number of single students that we're pushing into that area of the campus. And, you know, Alan was pretty nice with his comments about the age of the facilities. I keep saying, you know, we have parents who come to the campus, and they say, you know, this is the same furniture that I had when I was here in school. And actually, our admissions officer tells me that it's grandparents that are saying that. The two residence halls that we want to improve with this initial phase of work were built in 1950, and so actually they're the furnishings, not the mattresses, but the rest of the furnishings are essentially original, and so we're at the point where we need to do some replacement, refurbishing, and so our project that we're proposing actually it tackles two of our major residence halls: Hapner, which is a women's residence hall of over 300 beds; Langford, which is a male residence hall of over 400 beds. We'd spend about $7 million refurbishing the interiors of the rooms and also the lobby areas. And at the same time, we'd probably couple this with some energy enhancements that it would be part of a study that's ongoing right now. And then the other large aspect of this would be, as Alan mentioned, building another kind of the final building in our our Hedges Suite complex, which is, it's sort of a, what you would consider to be a semi-private residence hall arrangement. We would like to present this for action at the Regents' December 16th conference call, because we really would like to be able to do some of the interior work in Hapner and Langford over the course of this coming summer, so that we would have essentially new rooms in place for our students in the fall. That's all the comments I wish to make.
Thank you, Mr. Roloff. Any questions or comments from members of the board? Mr. Christian.
Chairman Buchanan, not necessarily specific to this proposal, but all the several that we've heard, and no problem with the renovations. They seem long overdue. I guess my only concern is, and maybe some data can answer some of it, but part of the capacity issue is tremendous growth we've felt. And as positive as I am about that, and as much as I understand we need to take care of those students, pre-recession we were talking about declining demographics and what enrollments may do, and I continue to be positive about enrollments. I think we've got a bigger market than local, and we will maintain high enrollments, but I guess we're talking about building buildings for growth and future growth. I have some just general concern about where that growth comes from as the economy recovers.
I think that's a prudent comment. Mr. Roloff, you have any perspectives?
Yes, Chairman Buchanan. First of all, the expansion that we're talking about is just 70 beds. And right now we're about 300 over our capacity. The other thing is that we, for better or worse, student preferences are different now than they were in 1950. And there's a lot of students who come to campus and wish to have a single room, a private room. And so we have a lot of our residence hall rooms were double or even triple bedrooms, and to satisfy the demands of students and in fact satisfy their demand that they're willing to pay for, a lot of our rooms are being downsized to single beds, and so that reduces our capacity. Right now, we had to, for this year, we had to deny a number of student requests for single bed rooms. And so even if we had a decline in our freshman enrollment in future years, essentially we wouldn't have any empty rooms because we'd be able to offer more of the single rooms that our students are requesting. And so there's certainly some people on our campus who are concerned that we're not building enough beds, but we believe this is a fairly conservative approach, and one that we can continue to fill because of the student demand for single rooms.
Thank you. Regent Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was impressed with the U of M campus's mention of I don't know whether it was a cross-pledge bond, but at least a collaborative, cooperative kind of a bonding program that they might be considering for some of these projects. And I know that there are some serious dormitory issues at Northern, and I believe Chancellor Sexton some time ago when we were talking about campus safety and security mentioned some things on the Billings campus, and I'm wondering if, as you move forward with this project, if you are considering anything that might recognize some economies of scale by doing what Missoula is doing?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Regent Hamilton, certainly one of the things that that we would consider is whether or not we could blend this housing project with the stadium financing as a multiple project bond issue. And we would also certainly be willing to explore, if you think about it, if we have a certain critical mass for a bond project, then this does provide the avenue for a small loan for Northern, for example, without the overhead costs of going through their own financing. And so certainly this would provide the opportunity for that. We also did have our underwriter explore the possibility of a consolidated MSU-UM bond issue, but the differences in the indenture made it too complicated to do.
Mr. Chairman, if I could follow up on that, because that was going to be my next question, was if this was the project mentioned in the stadium item. And I just want to make sure that if that happens, that the two bonding issues are kind of combined, that there'll still be a separate accounting for revenue and expenses. Is that a good assumption?
Mr. Chairman and Regent Hamilton, yes, that's true. That is something that we manage now. In our bond portfolio, we have a number of commitments, and we maintain a strict accounting of the debt service obligation for each entity and their revenues that come in and their expenditures.
Other comments or questions from members of the board? Campuses? Seeing none, and since we're pushing items E and F to after lunch, I would ask for any public comment. Mrs. Hinman.
Good morning, or good afternoon. Chairman, the mic isn't on. Okay. Now I can be heard. Regents, Commissioner, Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate this opportunity to comment on an item that you've already discussed this morning under the action items, and that is the conversion of RA and TA graduate students to a resident status for the purposes of charging them tuition. And I just wanted to say that does help us to be more competitive in our proposals to funding agencies at the state and federal levels, and in particular, it makes the conversations that take place in review panels more appealing, because it does come up upon occasion how much the state of Montana charges for out-of-state tuition to graduate students as opposed to resident tuition. So thank you for this opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Professor Hinman. Other public comment? Seeing none, got one more.
Hello. My name is Amanda Deal, and I am from MSU, and I just wanted to come up here as a representation of the students in Bozeman regarding the Easy End Zone project. We've had a lot of excitement, as was already expressed, and I just would like to say that the students are all for this. We were very pleased with the way that Dr. Cruzado came to the students before bringing this before the Board of Regents, and she's just got us all super thrilled about the way that this project has come about. The $4 million in donations, I don't think we could be any more excited about a project like this, and I think that it will help with retention. And in the future, I've attended so many of the Bobcat games, and I think that an awesome stadium will help, it'll raise ticket sales even more. So I'd just like to say that the students are totally behind this, and thank you for listening to our presentation.
Thanks, Ms. Deal.
Good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity to comment. My name's Andrew Wilcox. I'm an assistant professor in geosciences here. And I want to comment on the issue that Professor Hinman addressed regarding out-of-state tuition for graduate assistantships. Two specific things to add. Adopting this proposal would increase our competitiveness for the best students. We are competing nationally with other universities to recruit graduate students to our program, and allowing our research dollars to go further by not having to devote so much of them to out-of-state tuition would allow us to bring better students in. This would also allow us to grow our program by allowing us to actually support a larger number of students for a given amount of research dollars than the current condition. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Any further public comment? Seeing none, we are in recess.
Thank you, Regent Buchanan. The board members, we have lunch with the students now. I would like to just mention to the board, to those in attendance, the students and faculty are organizing a very positive, focused rally on the south end of the UC Center to talk about the value of higher education in Montana, and encourage anyone that can to attend. Unfortunately, we have our lunch schedule and we're already late for that, so we'll probably head straight there. But those of you that can participate, support the students and faculty in this endeavor would be appreciated. And we will recess at least by 1:30, which is where we're scheduled. Hopefully we'd even get started early since we're running behind. Thank you.